Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The forest was alive with sound. The distant rumble of thunder, the rustling of leaves, the occasional crack of a twig snapping underfoot. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, drenching the trees and turning the path into a slippery, muddied trail. It was the kind of weather that would keep most people indoors, curled up by a fire with a cup of tea. But not you. You'd come for something different, a break from the noise, from the demands of the world. The lodge, nestled deep in the woods, was supposed to be a haven, a peaceful escape from the mundane. But even as you neared the old stone building, something didn't feel quite right. The overgrown path seemed to swallow your footsteps, and the trees above stretched their branches like twisted fingers, blocking out what little light the storm had left behind. The lodge itself stood like a dark silhouette against the stormy sky. Its windows, dark and empty, stared back at you as you made your way up the creaky steps to the front door. You knocked 3 times, the sound echoing in the eerie stillness. No answer. You hesitated, your hand hovering near the door handle. Just as you were about to turn away, the door creaked open and a voice, low, scratchy, came from the darkness inside. "Come in. It's warm by the fire." The door swung open wider and you stepped inside, letting the dampness of the forest fall away behind you. The air inside the lodge was thick with the scent of damp wood, leather, and something else, something faintly metallic like old iron. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The room was dimly lit, the only source of light being the flickering flames, but you could just make out the worn furniture. A few mismatched chairs, a long oak table cluttered with half-filled glasses, and shelves stacked with dusty books, some of which appeared to be centuries old. A figure emerged from the shadows near the fire, their face obscured by the flickering light. They were tall and lean, with graying hair that seemed to shimmer like silver in the firelight. Their eyes, those eyes, they were unsettlingly bright, almost unnatural, as if they held secrets too heavy to share. "Welcome," they said again, their voice low but not unkind. "I'm the keeper of this place. We don't get many visitors, especially not in this weather. You're a brave soul." You nodded, offering a polite smile, though something in the air made your skin prickle with unease. The rain outside intensified, its rhythm quickening into a frantic drumbeat against the roof, a constant reminder of the storm raging outside. It felt as though the weather itself was closing in around you, trapping you within the walls of the lodge. "Sit by the fire," the keeper gestured, stepping aside. "You must be cold." You accepted the invitation, your boots leaving wet footprints on the wooden floor as you moved toward the hearth. The warmth of the fire was a welcome relief, and you eased into one of the chairs nearby. The keeper, still watching you with those strange, unblinking eyes, took a seat at the opposite end of the room, his movements slow, deliberate. There was an odd quietness to the room. The fire crackled, the wind howled outside, but within these 4 walls, it felt as though the world had been muted. You glanced around the lodge, noting the strange trinkets scattered across the shelves, jars filled with odd symbols, animal skulls, and peculiar carvings on the walls. Each one seemed to hold its own story, its own mystery. The walls themselves felt ancient, as though they had witnessed countless secrets they were unwilling to share. "Are you alone here?" you asked, your voice a little louder than usual, as if trying to break through the tension in the air. The keeper's smile deepened, but there was something unnerving about it. "Always alone when the storms come. People don't venture out much once the rain sets in." You nodded, but something about the way they spoke unsettled you. It wasn't just the words, but the way they were delivered. It was as if this place, this lodge, had been waiting for you, waiting for someone. The fire crackled louder for a moment, and the keeper's gaze followed the flames before returning to you. "You're wondering about the stories, aren't you?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. "The ones that everyone whispers about. The disappearances. The strange things that happen here in the woods. People come and go, but only a few return with their stories." A sudden chill swept through you despite the warmth of the fire. Your mind flashed back to the long drive to this place, to the warnings you'd overheard in the nearby town. "It's an old place, that lodge," they'd said. "Strange things happen out there." You opened your mouth to ask more, but just then, a loud bang echoed from somewhere deep within the lodge, so sudden, so forceful, that it made you jump in your seat. The keeper didn't flinch. His eyes never left yours. "Don't worry about that," he said, his tone reassuring, but his words felt hollow. "It's just the wind." You hesitated, glancing around the room. But the wind had stopped. Everything had fallen silent again, too silent. The rain continued to pour outside, its rhythmic drumming against the roof now strangely calming. Still, you couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that there was more to this place than it appeared. And just as you began to consider whether it was time to leave, the keeper stood up, his tall form moving gracefully, almost unnaturally so, toward a dark hallway at the back of the lodge. "Come," he said, as if reading your thoughts. "There's something I want to show you." You glanced toward the door, half tempted to leave, but something stopped you. Maybe it was the fire, or perhaps it was the strange pull of curiosity. Against your better judgment, you stood and followed him down the shadowy hallway, the flickering light from the fire slowly fading as you stepped further into the unknown. The hallway stretched on, its walls narrow and crooked, covered in ancient tapestries that seemed to come alive in the dim light. The air grew heavier, cooler. The silence between you and the keeper grew thick, pressing in on you, making your heart race. Then, as you neared the end of the hallway, you noticed something, a door slightly ajar. Beyond it, the unmistakable sound of muffled voices. The keeper paused before the door, his hand resting lightly on the knob. "This," he said softly, "is where the real story begins." And with that, he pushed the door open. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a room much larger than you'd anticipated. The dim light from the hallway barely touched the far corners, casting everything in shadow. The room was circular, with a high vaulted ceiling that disappeared into darkness. What struck you most, however, was the scent, musty and earthy, with a trace of something faintly sour, like old stone that had been untouched for centuries. You stepped inside cautiously, your eyes trying to adjust to the gloom. The floor was covered with a thick layer of dust, and scattered across it were piles of old, forgotten objects, tattered rugs, chairs with broken legs, and what appeared to be old, discarded furniture. But that wasn't the most unsettling part. The walls. They were covered in strange symbols, carvings, scratches, and drawings that seemed to move in the flickering light. Some were crude, others intricate, but all of them gave off a chilling sense of unease. They seemed to pulse, almost like they were alive, watching you. The keeper had already moved to the center of the room, where a large stone pedestal stood. On it rested a worn, leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. The firelight caught the edges of the book, casting long shadows across its surface. "Sit," the keeper said, gesturing to an old armchair beside the pedestal. His voice was softer now, almost reverential. "You've come all this way for answers, haven't you?" You nodded, but your throat was tight and your heart hammered in your chest. The air in the room felt heavier, as though it were pressing down on you, suffocating you. You didn't want to sit. You wanted to turn and run, to leave the lodge and never look back. But something, the strange pull, the curiosity, kept you rooted to the spot. Reluctantly, you lowered yourself into the chair. The wood creaked under your weight, and you had to suppress a shiver as the room seemed to grow colder. The keeper didn't sit, but instead, he hovered beside the pedestal, his eyes fixed on the book. "This," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "is the Journal of the Lost. It has been passed down through generations, from the first to the last. It tells the story of this place, of the forest, and of the people who have come before you." You felt your pulse quicken as the keeper reached out and slowly opened the journal, the pages groaning in protest as they were turned. The flickering firelight caught a few words on the first page, symbols you couldn't quite understand, but they looked like a mix of ancient runes and drawings of twisted trees. "As you read," the keeper continued, his voice growing softer, almost a whisper, "you'll see the truth behind the stories. The ones that wander into these woods don't always leave. Some never return. And others find something they never expected. But no matter what, they are never quite the same." His eyes flicked to yours, his gaze sharp and intense. The room seemed to close in around you, the walls pressing closer as the fire crackled louder in the distance. You felt a sudden, unnerving need to look at the journal, to understand, to find out what lay inside. But the keeper's voice cut through your thoughts before you could move. "You must understand that once you read it, there's no turning back. The woods will know you. The trees will whisper your name. And you'll never be the same again." The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, like a warning. The pages turned again, and this time, you saw something that made your breath catch in your throat, sketched drawings of figures, distorted shapes that seemed to melt in the firelight. Their eyes were hollow, their forms bent and twisted in ways that defied logic. They looked almost human, but something was horribly wrong about them. Before you could speak, the keeper turned the page again, and this time the symbols seemed to shift on the page, changing, twisting, rearranging themselves in ways that didn't make sense. Your eyes locked on one particular symbol, and for a moment, you thought you saw it move as if it were alive. Suddenly, the room grew darker. The firelight flickered violently, casting long, monstrous shadows against the walls. The temperature dropped so suddenly that you could see your breath in the air. "You feel it now, don't you?" The keeper's voice was barely a whisper, as though he were speaking to himself. The pull of the forest, the thirst for something more. His eyes were wide now, staring at you with a hunger that you couldn't quite understand. The silence in the room deepened. The fire cracked, louder than before, but you barely heard it over the growing sense of dread that was settling in your chest. It was as though the very walls were alive, breathing, watching, waiting. Without warning, there was a sharp, cracking sound from the other side of the room, a loud, echoing thud that made you jump out of your seat. The keeper remained still, his expression unreadable, as if he expected this. "That," he said, his tone a little more forceful, "is just the beginning." Your heart skipped a beat as another sound followed, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps dragging across the floor, coming closer. You instinctively glanced toward the darkened hallway, your mind racing with the horrifying possibility of what, or who, might be coming. But the keeper didn't flinch. His eyes were fixed on you now, the eerie smile returning to his lips. "They've come to greet you," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the growing sounds of the storm outside. "Welcome to the forest's true heart." And then the room went deathly still. The silence in the room grew oppressive, thick and suffocating. The rain outside had become a constant roar, a low rumbling in the distance that seemed to shake the very foundations of the lodge. But within these walls, everything was eerily quiet, save for the slow, dragging footsteps coming from the dark hallway beyond the door. Your heart pounded in your chest, and despite every rational thought telling you to run, you remained frozen. The air felt too heavy, too thick to move through. The footsteps grew louder with each passing second, slow and deliberate, as if the person, or whatever it was savoring every step, drawing closer. You couldn't see anything yet. The hallway was too dark, too far away. But the sound was unmistakable, a heavy, uneven tread, like something dragging its feet across the floor. The keeper hadn't moved. He simply stood there, watching you, his expression unreadable. His eyes gleamed in the dim light, far too bright in contrast to the darkness surrounding you. It was as if he were watching you with some twisted fascination, waiting for your next move, or perhaps waiting for you to give in to fear. Then the door to the room creaked open, the hinges protesting as they swung inward, and there, in the threshold, stood a figure. At first, all you could see were dark shapes and shadows, the figure outlined by the dim light of the room behind it. But as the figure stepped fully into the room, your stomach twisted in revulsion. It wasn't quite human. The creature that stood before you was hunched over, its limbs long and spindly, like branches twisted by wind and age. Its skin was pale, stretched tight across its bones, and its face, a face you could barely recognize as human, was gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to suck the light from the room. Its mouth hung open in a grotesque, toothless grin, and a faint, greenish glow seemed to pulse from deep within its chest. It was dragging something behind it, something heavy, something that scraped across the floor with each movement. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, sharp and agonizing, but it didn't stop. It kept coming closer, closer, until it was standing right in front of you, towering over you like some nightmare-given flesh. Your breath caught in your throat. You wanted to scream, to shout, to run. But your body refused to move. Your legs were frozen in place, your feet glued to the floor as if the very ground beneath you had become a trap. The creature tilted its head to one side, its neck cracking loudly as if it hadn't moved in ages. Its hollow eyes stared at you, unblinking, and for a moment, you thought you saw something else in those eyes. Something human, something sad, trapped behind that monstrous facade. The keeper, still standing at the pedestal, spoke in a voice that sounded almost amused. "Don't worry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It won't hurt you. Not yet." The creature didn't move, but its eyes seemed to follow the keeper's words as if it understood. It continued to stand there, its strange, uneven breathing the only sound that filled the room, until it finally crouched down in front of you, its face mere inches from yours. You could feel its breath, cold and damp, brushing against your skin. It smelled of rot, of earth long buried, of something ancient and forgotten. You couldn't tear your eyes away from it, couldn't look away from the gaping blackness of its mouth, as though something were waiting there, just beneath the surface. "Don't be afraid," the keeper said, his tone eerily calm, as though this were a perfectly ordinary occurrence. "It's only here to guide you." The words didn't make sense. Guide you? To what? To where? What could something like that possibly want with you? Suddenly, the creature let out a low, guttural sound, a hiss almost like a whisper but deeper, darker. The air in the room seemed to change, thickening as if it were being pulled toward the creature. The fire sputtered, the flames dimming for a brief moment before flaring back up, casting flickering shadows against the walls. Then, without warning, the creature lifted its head, and the room seemed to shake with a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through your bones. The floor beneath you groaned as though it were reacting to the creature's presence. It raised one of its long, twisted hands toward you, and before you could react, its bony fingers brushed against your cheek. The touch was icy cold, sending a shock of paralysis through your body, making your limbs go numb. "You're here now," the keeper said, stepping forward. His voice was like a chant, hypnotic, as though each word held power of its own. "The woods have claimed you, and they will never let you go." The room around you seemed to warp and twist, the walls bending and contracting, the air growing thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Your vision blurred, and for a moment, you thought you were losing consciousness, slipping into something far darker than sleep. The creature's grip tightened, its long fingers digging into your skin, pulling you forward. You couldn't scream. You couldn't breathe. It was as if everything had become muffled, as though the world itself had drowned in fog. And then, with one final agonizing tug, the creature pulled. Everything in the room shifted, like a wave crashing over you. The fire dimmed, the walls seemed to dissolve into mist, and you were no longer in the lodge. You were somewhere else. The trees were tall here, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their branches stretching toward a sky choked with dark clouds. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of the earth and decay. And through the trees you could see something else, something far in the distance, faintly glowing in the gloom. A flickering light. The ground beneath your feet was no longer the familiar wooden floors of the lodge, but soft, wet earth, thick with moss and leaves that gave way with each step. Your breath caught in your throat as you looked around, the world feeling unreal and distorted, as if you'd stepped into a nightmare. The forest stretched on in every direction, an endless expanse of twisted trees, their bark dark and slick with moisture. Their branches writhed like skeletal fingers, reaching out to scrape the sky, as though begging for something or someone. You were no longer alone. The creature, which had once been standing beside you in the lodge, was now ahead, its long, spindly limbs moving with unnatural speed through the dense undergrowth. You followed, though you felt an overwhelming pull to turn back, to run. But your legs refused to move in any direction except forward, and it was as though the forest itself was guiding you, nudging you closer to whatever lay ahead. The air here was thick, humid, and filled with the heavy scent of wet earth, decaying wood, and something else, something faintly sweet and nauseating like rotting fruit. The deeper you moved into the forest, the more oppressive it became, as though the trees were closing in around you, their limbs intertwining to form a canopy so thick that no light could penetrate. The only source of illumination came from the faint, flickering glow in the distance, a light that seemed far too steady to be natural, as though it were waiting for you. The creature didn't look back, its movements fast and deliberate, as if it were already anticipating your next steps. Its twisted limbs barely brushed against the ground, leaving no trace behind. You could feel it, watching you even when it was out of sight. Its presence hung in the air, like a shadow stretching across the very fabric of the forest. Suddenly the forest grew quieter. The sound of the rain had lessened, muffled now, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The only sound was the soft rustling of leaves underfoot and the occasional snap of a twig, but even that felt wrong. Each step you took seemed to echo through the vast emptiness, growing louder with every passing moment. A distant howl, not quite animal, not quite human, pierced the stillness. It was close. Too close. The sound was enough to freeze the blood in your veins. You instinctively looked around, your eyes darting from shadow to shadow, searching for the source of the sound. But there was nothing, just the endless, suffocating darkness of the trees. The light grew brighter, closer now, and as you pushed through the thick underbrush, you realized that it wasn't a natural light at all. It was far too steady, too focused. It flickered in a way that reminded you of a flame, but the air around it remained still, unaffected by any wind. The forest seemed to part around the light, as if it were drawing you toward it. Then, as you stepped forward, your foot hit something solid, stone. You looked down, and to your surprise, there was a narrow path beneath the moss and fallen leaves, hidden until now. The path was made of large, uneven stones, each one carved with strange markings that seemed to shimmer in the dark. As you followed the path, the world around you seemed to grow more twisted, more alien. The trees grew taller, their trunks wider, the shadows deeper. You could feel it now, the pressure. The trees weren't just watching, they were waiting. The entire forest seemed to pulse with life, its heartbeat slow and deliberate, as if it were alive in some dark, ancient way. Ahead, the light flickered once more, then disappeared. For a brief moment, there was only darkness. Then, as if the forest itself had exhaled, the light returned, revealing a clearing. The stones beneath your feet continued, leading into the center of the clearing. At the heart of the clearing stood an altar, a stone structure, weathered and ancient, covered in thick moss and overgrown vines. The light you had been following flickered above it, hovering in the air like a will-o'-the-wisp, casting an ethereal glow over the stone. But it wasn't the light that held your attention. It was the symbols carved into the altar, symbols similar to those you had seen in the journal. The creature stopped at the edge of the clearing, its glowing eyes fixed on the altar. You followed its gaze, feeling something deep in your chest stir, something primal, something dark. The air felt thick here, the ground beneath your feet cold and unyielding, as if it were unwilling to let you move any further. The creature turned toward you, its hollow eyes gleaming in the dim light. For the first time since it had appeared, it made no move. It simply stood there waiting. And then, just as you were about to ask it what was happening, you heard a voice, a whisper, soft and slow, drifting on the wind. It seemed to come from all around you, from the very trees themselves. "Welcome home." The voice was both familiar and foreign, an echo that reverberated in your mind. It felt like something ancient, something that had been waiting for you for a long time. You instinctively took a step forward, your feet moving of their own accord, until you stood just before the altar. The stone was cold beneath your fingertips as you reached out to touch it, and as your hand made contact, the symbols on the altar began to glow, pulsating with an eerie light. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath you, and the forest seemed to exhale, as if waking from a long, deep sleep. The trees groaned, their branches creaking and bending, as though something vast and ancient was stirring from within the earth. A low growl echoed in the distance, and you turned, your heart racing. Something was coming. Something had been waiting. And then the creature stepped forward, its eyes now gleaming with an unsettling hunger. It reached out one long bony hand and placed it on the altar. The symbols began to glow brighter, faster, until they were almost blinding. And then, nothing. The light vanished, leaving you standing in complete darkness, alone in the heart of the forest. The silence after the light faded was deafening. The forest had become unnaturally still, as though the very air had frozen in place, holding its breath. You stood in the darkness, your senses heightened, every nerve in your body screaming for you to move, to flee. But something kept you rooted to the spot, an unseen force, as if the ground itself had claimed you. Your breath was ragged now, quick and shallow, each exhale seeming too loud in the eerie quiet. The trees, once so towering and oppressive, now felt like prison bars, enclosing you in their dark, ancient embrace. The air was thick, cloying, suffocating. It was as though you had stepped beyond the edge of reality and into something far older, something much more dangerous. You couldn't see anything in the darkness, but you felt the presence of the creature behind you. You didn't need to turn around to know it was there. You could feel its hollow eyes on you, its bony fingers twitching in anticipation. Its presence was a shadow that hovered just behind your shoulder, always there, always waiting. And then, as if in answer to the growing tension, the wind shifted. The trees groaned and whispered, their leaves rustling with a sound like 1,000 voices murmuring in the darkness. The ground beneath your feet trembled again, just slightly, but enough to send a jolt of fear through your body. And then, there was a sound. A deep, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the very heart of the earth itself, shaking the air and sending a wave of coldness down your spine. The growl wasn't just a sound, it was a presence. Something ancient, something hungry. You spun around, your heart pounding, eyes wide with terror, and in the center of the clearing you saw it. A figure, massive and hulking, stood in the shadows beyond the altar. Its shape was indistinct, shrouded in darkness, but you could make out the outline of its towering frame, tall, broad, with limbs that seemed to stretch and writhe like the very trees around it. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, red and gleaming, and its mouth hung open in a grotesque grin, rows of sharp, jagged teeth visible even in the darkness. It stepped forward, and the ground beneath you quaked as though the forest itself was being torn apart. The creature's steps were slow, deliberate, but each one seemed to vibrate through your entire body, rattling your bones. It moved with a purpose, a predatory grace that made your heart race even faster. A low, rumbling voice, deep and resonant, echoed in your mind, not from the creature's mouth, but from everywhere, from the very air itself. "You are mine now." The words weren't just spoken. They were felt like a deep, resonating chord that reverberated through your chest. You couldn't tell if it was the creature speaking, or if it was the forest itself that was speaking to you. But one thing was certain, You had entered a place where the lines between reality and nightmare had blurred. The creature's eyes locked onto yours and the world seemed to shift. The ground around you started to break apart, fissures forming in the earth as if it were being torn open by an unseen force. The trees around you began to tremble, their branches shaking violently as though reacting to the creature's presence. The creature's voice boomed again, shaking the very air around you. You have awakened what should have stayed asleep. Your legs trembled beneath you, your body begging you to run, to escape, but you couldn't move. The pull of the forest was too strong, too overwhelming. The creature's eyes burned into yours, and for a moment, you felt as though it could see into your very soul. You were not alone. The forest itself was alive, and it was hungry. You glanced at the altar again, the symbols now glowing with an eerie, pulsating light. The stone beneath your hand still hummed with a dark energy, as if the very earth beneath you had come alive, its heartbeat synchronizing with your own. The creature stepped forward again, its enormous form looming over you. The air grew colder still, the temperature plummeting as a strange mist began to swirl around your feet, creeping up your legs like icy fingers. The whispers of the forest grew louder now, voices swirling in the wind, blending with the growl of the creature. They were not words you could understand, at least not consciously, but they filled your mind with a deep, unsettling sense of knowing. These were the voices of the lost, the voices of those who had come before you, those who had made the same journey into this cursed place. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air, and the sky above you seemed to tear open, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness. The trees around you twisted violently, their roots ripping free from the ground, the branches reaching out like gnarled hands grasping at the sky. The creature let out a low, guttural laugh, a sound that seemed to vibrate in your chest, a sound that made your very bones ache. "You are the offering," it said, its voice dripping with malice. "The forest hungers, and you are its feast." The mist began to close in around you, the darkness growing heavier. You could barely breathe now, the air thick with the scent of rot and decay, the smell of something ancient and alive, something hungry. You turned again to the altar, feeling the pull of it, the urge to touch it again. And then, something shifted in the air. A change, a distortion, as if the very fabric of reality was bending around you. The forest seemed to move, to breathe, to pulse with life. The creature's eyes narrowed, and the ground trembled once more. "Too late," it growled. "You should have never come. Now you belong to the woods." You opened your mouth to scream, but no sound escaped. You tried to move, to run, but your legs refused to obey. The forest was closing in, the trees leaning forward, their branches like claws reaching for you. And then the light returned. A single, blinding flash of white, so intense that it burned into your retinas. For a moment, everything was a blur of light and shadow. You shielded your eyes, the brightness searing, but then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the light disappeared. You were no longer standing in the clearing. You were somewhere else. The world around you spun, and for a brief moment, everything felt weightless, as if you were suspended in time. The air was cold and thick with the smell of damp earth and rotting leaves. Then, with a violent jolt, the ground beneath your feet slammed back into place and you stumbled forward, nearly falling. You caught yourself just in time, your hands sinking into the wet moss that coated the ground. You looked around, blinking to clear your vision, but what you saw made your stomach twist. You were no longer in the forest. The trees, once towering and twisted, had vanished. Instead, you found yourself in a vast, barren expanse, the ground flat and smooth like a cracked and dried lakebed. The sky above was a swirling vortex of black and red, swirling clouds churning in impossible patterns. The air was thick with an unnatural, oppressive heat, and the ground felt wrong, too solid, too rigid, as though you were standing on something that was not meant to be touched. In the distance, something glimmered, a faint, flickering light, the same one that had led you through the forest. But now it was brighter, pulsing with an eerie rhythm, as if it were calling to you, drawing you closer. Every instinct in your body screamed to turn away, to run in the opposite direction. But once again, your feet moved on their own, drawn by the light like a moth to a flame. You took a hesitant step forward, your feet sinking slightly into the cracked earth. The ground was smooth, but beneath the surface, there was an unsettling sense of movement, something shifting just beneath your feet, waiting to break through. The further you walked, the more the air seemed to close in around you, thickening with every breath. Then the ground beneath you trembled again, stronger this time. The earth cracked open in a jagged line, splitting apart like a wound, and from the depths below, a sound rose, low, guttural, like a growl that reverberated through the very bones of the earth. It was a sound that made your skin crawl, a sound so ancient, so full of malice that it made you want to turn and run. But again your legs refused to move. The pull toward the light was irresistible. You couldn't escape it. It was as if the very fabric of this place was pulling you toward it. As you drew closer, the light grew brighter, more intense, until it felt like your eyes would burn from the sheer force of it. And then, just as you were about to step into the light, the ground beneath you gave way. You fell. For a moment, you were weightless again, your body hurtling through the air, and then, boom, you hit the ground. The impact knocked the wind from your lungs, and you gasped for air, disoriented and dizzy. Your head spun, and it took a moment for your eyes to focus. You were no longer standing in the barren expanse. You were somewhere else entirely. The world around you was a strange, twisted version of the forest. The trees, now unnaturally tall and thin, stretched up into a sky filled with roiling clouds, their branches bending and twisting in unnatural shapes. The ground beneath you was a blackened, charred earth, as if something had burned through it. The air was thick with a faint, acrid scent, like sulfur and ash. You could hear it now, the soft, low whisper of the wind through the trees. But it wasn't a natural wind. It was a voice. A voice that hummed just beneath your consciousness, barely audible but unmistakable. The voice of the forest, the voice of the thing that had been waiting for you. You took a step forward and something moved in the shadows. Your heart skipped a beat and you turned toward the sound, but there was nothing there. Nothing visible. But you could feel it. Something was watching you, hidden in the darkness just beyond your reach. A rustling sound came from behind you and you whirled around, your breath catching in your throat. There, standing in the shadows, was the creature, the one from the forest. Its glowing eyes burned through the darkness, watching you, waiting. Its twisted form was almost unrecognizable now, its long limbs stretching and contorting in unnatural angles, its bony fingers twitching as if it were eager to reach out and claim you. And then the voice returned, louder this time, echoing through the twisted trees. It has begun. The creature stepped forward, its footsteps slow and deliberate, each one sending a ripple through the ground beneath your feet. It didn't move like a human. It moved like something else, something ancient, something that had no place in this world. Your heart pounded in your chest, but you couldn't look away. You didn't know why, but you couldn't tear your gaze from its glowing eyes. They were pulling you in, trapping you in their hypnotic glow. You are not meant to be here, the creature rasped, its voice low and guttural. It was like a growl, but there was something almost sad in it, something ancient and full of sorrow. This is the place where the lost go, it continued, its voice thick with a strange, unsettling calm. The place where the forest calls those it chooses. The trees around you seemed to lean in closer, their branches twisting toward you, their leaves rustling in an unnatural rhythm, as though they were alive, as though they were part of the creature itself. The air around you thickened and the temperature dropped, sending a chill through your spine. You realized with a sinking feeling that the creature was right. You were lost. The lodge, the forest, the strange altar, they were all part of this place. Part of the forest's dark heart. The creature wasn't just guarding it, it was part of it. It was as much a part of the forest as the twisted trees and the cold, damp air. You have awakened the path, the creature continued. The path that leads to where the forest meets the void. The words echoed in your mind, and with them came a realization. The path was not just a physical one. It was a journey. A journey that, once begun, could not be undone. The forest had claimed you. There was no going back. And whatever awaited you at the end of this path, you weren't sure you wanted to find out. But the creature's eyes still gleamed in the dark, pulling you forward, pulling you deeper into the heart of the forest. The creature's eyes never left you, their piercing glow a constant reminder that you were no longer in control. Every breath you took felt labored, as if the air itself were pushing against your lungs, making it harder to think, harder to move. The forest around you had become an oppressive, living entity, its roots tangled in the earth, its branches twisted into unnatural shapes, like fingers reaching toward the sky in some silent, mournful plea. The creature took another step forward, its long, twisted limbs creaking like ancient wood. It paused for a moment, its head tilting slightly to one side as if it were considering something. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint, rustling whispers of the trees around you. And then, without warning, it spoke again, its voice barely a rasp, like the wind in a forgotten graveyard. The forest has many secrets, it said, its voice a strange blend of sorrow and menace. And it has claimed you now. You are part of it. You walk its path. There is no going back. You wanted to speak, to ask questions, but your throat felt tight, as though something invisible were choking off your words. Fear churned in your stomach, but beneath it, there was a growing curiosity, a desire to understand, to know what was happening to you, to uncover the truth of this strange place. Why? was the only word you could manage, the sound rough and ragged in your throat. The creature seemed to hear you, though it gave no indication that it understood the word. It simply continued, its voice swirling in the still air. Because the forest needs it. The forest needs the lost. The words made no sense. You were not lost. You had come here seeking something, yes, but you hadn't chosen to lose yourself. You hadn't chosen this path. Yet, somehow as the creature's words sank in, they began to feel true. The more you thought about it, the more you realized that, in a sense, you had come here for a reason. The pull of the forest had been undeniable. The creature's glowing eyes seemed to flicker, as if sensing the confusion in your mind. The forest is a place between worlds, between life and death, between what was and what is forgotten. Its voice lowered, becoming almost a whisper. The lodge, the keeper, they are guardians of the threshold. Those who wander too close may fall into the path that calls those who are already half lost. You felt a chill run down your spine, and you instinctively took a step back, your heart pounding louder in your chest. You hadn't understood the danger of this place until now, hadn't realized that by stepping into the forest, you had already crossed a line. You were in a realm where the normal rules of reality didn't apply. The world you knew, the world you had come from, was far behind, and ahead of you stretched something far more ancient, far more primal. The creature let out a low, rumbling sound that might have been a laugh. It stepped forward again, its long, thin fingers reaching out to touch the base of one of the nearby trees. At its touch, the bark of the tree seemed to shift, its surface rippling like liquid before a voice, low and gravelly, emerged from the tree itself. "The forest sees you now," the voice echoed. "It will guide you, whether you wish it or not." A rush of cold air swept through the clearing, and the trees around you groaned, their branches creaking and snapping as though alive, as though they were speaking. The ground trembled again, more violently this time, and for a moment, you thought you heard something beneath the surface. Something heavy, something immense, stirring beneath the soil. "Do not fear the path," the creature whispered, its voice like a low chant now, a dark lullaby. "Follow it and you will understand." Your feet felt heavy, as if they were sinking into the ground with every step. But something pulled you forward, something more powerful than your own will. You had to move. You couldn't stop. It wasn't just the creature guiding you now, it was the forest itself, the very earth beneath your feet, the roots that twisted in the soil. It was alive, and it had decided your fate. You moved through the forest, your eyes wide with fear, but your body unwilling to resist. The trees parted before you, the path ahead illuminated by a strange, flickering light that came from somewhere deep in the forest. It was soft, ethereal, but it beckoned you forward like a moth to a flame. The whispers in the trees grew louder, more insistent, their voices blending into a chorus of low murmurs that filled your mind with images, fragments of memories that weren't your own. Somewhere deep within the forest, the path forked. Two trails lay ahead, each leading into the darkness, and each seemed to pulse with its own eerie energy. The creature paused just before the fork, its glowing eyes fixed on you, waiting for you to choose. "The path to the left," it rasped, "leads to the heart of the forest. The true heart. The place where the woods call their children. The place where the lost find their way home." You felt a pull toward the left path, as though it were meant for you, a path that had always been there, waiting for your arrival. The air around it seemed to hum with energy, as if something ancient and powerful lay just beyond the reach of the trees. But the path to the right, though darker, more shadowed, felt like a place you should avoid, a place where no one should venture. "The path to the right," the creature continued, "is the path of truth. The truth of what lies beyond the veil. The truth of those who never leave." You swallowed hard, your throat dry, but the forest around you was growing more oppressive by the second. The longer you stood there, the more you could feel the trees closing in around you, the more you could hear their whispers. The choice felt unbearable. The creature didn't move. It stood silently, its glowing eyes watching you, waiting for you to make your decision. The wind shifted, the whispers growing louder, the forest almost alive with anticipation. You took a step forward, but you didn't know which path to choose. The air was thick with the weight of it, the pressure of something ancient pushing down on you, suffocating you with its gravity. And then, just as you were about to make your decision, the ground trembled once more, and the sound of something massive moving beneath the earth filled the air, a sound that made your chest tighten with fear, as if the forest itself were awakening. The earth beneath you rumbled once again, stronger this time, and you staggered slightly as the ground seemed to shift beneath your feet. The trees groaned, their branches bending with unnatural force, as though the very forest was alive, reacting to something, waiting for something. A deep, growling sound echoed from beneath the ground, a growl so ancient and primal it shook your bones. It felt like the forest itself was waking, like a creature long dormant stirring to life. You froze, heart hammering in your chest, and for a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The creature, its long limbs still and tense, looked at you with an intensity that felt as if it could pierce through you. The air around you crackled with the weight of the decision you were about to make. The forest was listening, its every branch, every leaf, waiting for your choice. The path to the left pulsed with a strange light, an ethereal glow that seemed to call to you, as if it were the promise of something hidden, something you couldn't yet comprehend. The trees along that path appeared to sway, as though beckoning you forward. It felt like the right choice, the path of destiny, as though it was where you were meant to go. But the path to the right, it was darker, its entrance almost swallowed by the shadows of the trees. It was a void, an emptiness that tugged at you, pulling you into its depths. The whispers from that direction were louder, sharper, as if truth itself lay in the dark silence beyond. There was something unnerving about that path, but it was also something raw, authentic. It called to the deepest part of you, as if it could expose every hidden corner of your soul, every secret you didn't even know you kept. The creature's voice cut through your thoughts again, its tone cold and unfeeling, as if it had no need to explain its choice. The left path leads to the heart of the forest. There you will find what you seek. It paused, its glowing eyes never leaving yours. But the right path leads beyond what you know, to where the forest's hunger is fed. The words seemed to hang in the air between you, thick and heavy, their meaning uncertain. Both paths had their allure. The path on the left promised understanding, but it was the forest's heart, an unknown, deep-seated force that had already claimed so many before you. The right path promised truth, but the very mention of the forest's hunger filled you with a deep, gnawing fear. You looked between the two paths, your feet unmoving. The decision weighed heavily on you, the knowledge that whichever path you chose would lead you further into a world you couldn't escape. They are both the same, the creature said, almost as if reading your mind. The forest does not offer simple answers. It offers the truth of what is. You could feel the air around you shift, a low hum filling the space. The wind began to pick up, whispering through the branches of the trees, the words almost familiar, as if the forest itself was urging you to understand. You will never return to what you once knew, the creature said, a hint of something like sadness flickering in its voice. The forest does not let go of those who enter. It binds them to its roots. The shadows around you stretched long and dark, pulling you in. The branches of the trees creaked in the wind, groaning under the weight of some unseen pressure. For a brief moment, the light from the left path seemed to flicker, as though it were fading, disappearing into the darkness. You stepped closer to the fort, your body fighting against the invisible pull of the paths. The creature's form, so unnatural, so otherworldly, was becoming more distinct now, its twisted shape drawing closer, as if it were leaning in, waiting for your decision. The sound of the wind grew louder, a howling rush that drowned out all other noise. The forest felt like a living, breathing thing, its pulse quickening, anticipating your next move. You could almost hear the earth beneath you stirring, a deep, unsettling growl rising from within the soil. The trees themselves seemed to grow taller, stretching out their limbs like hands ready to grab hold of you. And then, as if to push you further into your choice, the ground beneath your feet shifted again. A deep tremor ran through the earth, sending a ripple through the soil, and the whispering wind picked up speed, swirling around you, tugging at your hair, your clothes, your very thoughts. It is time. The voice came not from the creature, but from the forest itself. It filled your mind, wrapping around your thoughts like tendrils, urging you forward. You could feel the weight of the decision pushing down on your chest, making it hard to breathe, as if something was forcing you to move, to choose. Without thinking, you took a step toward the left path. The moment your foot touched the ground, a loud crack echoed through the forest, and the trees around you seemed to shudder, as though in response to your choice. The ground beneath you began to shift, and the air grew even thicker, the scent of decay and rot more pungent than ever before. The light from the left path flared, almost blinding in its intensity, and for a moment, it felt as though the world had stopped spinning. And then, without warning, the creature lunged. Its long, spindly arms shot forward, faster than you could react, its fingers wrapping around your wrist in a grip that felt like ice. You gasped in shock, trying to pull away, but the creature's hold was unyielding. Its glowing eyes burned into yours, and its voice came again, slow and deliberate. You have chosen. The words seemed to echo in your mind, reverberating with a terrible finality. The creature's form began to twist, its limbs elongating, contorting in unnatural ways as it dragged you toward the left path. The forest roared around you, the ground trembling with an intensity that shook the very air. You tried to resist, but the forest was relentless, its pull far stronger than any willpower you had left. The trees reached out, their branches snatching at you, pulling you closer to the path. You could feel the power of the forest growing around you, a pressure that threatened to crush you under its weight. The light ahead grew brighter, pulsating with an energy that felt both alien and ancient. You knew deep down that you were about to enter a place beyond understanding, a place where the truth would no longer matter. As you crossed the threshold into the heart of the forest, everything around you shifted. The very air warped, becoming dense and heavy, pressing down on you with a weight that was almost unbearable. The forest closed in around you, its dark presence a constant shadow over your every step. And then the whispers began. They weren't just voices anymore. They were feelings, echoes of something ancient and forgotten, seeping into your mind like a poison. You could feel the forest pulling at your memories, at your very essence. The path ahead seemed to stretch on forever, the shadows growing deeper, the air colder. And in the distance, the light flickered one last time before fading into the abyss. As you stepped deeper into the forest, the world seemed to fall away. The ground beneath your feet was soft, like damp sponge, absorbing your every movement, making it feel as though the earth itself was swallowing you whole. The trees, towering and gnarled, twisted above you like a canopy of ancient hands, clawing at the sky. Their leaves, dark and saturated, swayed in the wind like a silent choir, their whispers growing louder with each step you took. The very air pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, as if it too were alive, breathing alongside the forest, pulling you deeper into its maze of shadows. The light from the path ahead dimmed, flickering like a dying flame. It seemed to stretch on, receding further into the distance with every step, its ethereal glow taunting you, beckoning you forward while refusing to reveal its source. It was like a mirage in the desert, so close, yet always just out of reach. And as you moved, the sounds of the forest grew louder, twigs snapping, branches creaking, the rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush, but you saw nothing. No eyes, no movement. Only the vast, oppressive darkness that surrounded you. The whispers, though, were constant. They came from all around, indistinct and distant, but they were there, always present, worming their way into your mind. Some sounded like fragments of words, others like incoherent murmurings, like a crowd speaking in a language you could almost understand but never fully grasp. It felt as if the forest itself were trying to communicate, trying to tell you something. Or perhaps it was just trying to pull you further into its madness. Your heart pounded, the air growing colder with each step. You pulled your cloak tighter around your shoulders, but it did little to ward off the chill that seemed to seep into your very bones. The silence, save for the distant whispers, was deafening, a vacuum that sucked away any sound you tried to make. When you opened your mouth to speak, no words came out, only an oppressive, suffocating silence. Then there was a sound. Crack. You froze, your breath caught in your throat. The crack came from behind you, from the direction you had just come. Your mind raced as you turned around, but there was nothing. Only the shadowed trees, swaying in the wind, and the path stretching back into the dark. The crack had sounded like someone, moving behind you, a snap of a twig or the breaking of branches. You stepped back instinctively, your hand reaching for your pocket as if you could defend yourself against whatever was out there. But the feeling, the sense of being watched, remained. It wasn't just the trees. It wasn't just the creature that had guided you here. There was something else. Something that had been here long before you, something older than the forest itself. And then, as if answering your thoughts, the whispers grew louder. You are not alone. The voice was not just in your ears now. It was inside your head, a sharp and sudden intrusion making you stagger for a moment. Your chest tightened as the words echoed inside you, resonating with something deep and primal. The trees around you groaned, their twisted trunks creaking as if the forest were speaking, reacting to the very air you breathed. You could almost feel the ground shifting beneath you, the earth beneath your feet feeling like it was sinking, becoming less solid, more fluid. It was as though the forest itself was shifting, changing shape, pulling you further into its depths. A rustle came from the darkness ahead, a sound that made your skin crawl. It was the sound of something moving, something large, something alive. You hesitated. Should you turn back? Could you even turn back? But when you tried to take a step in the opposite direction, the ground shifted again, the earth beneath your feet suddenly giving way. You stumbled forward, catching yourself on a jagged branch that jutted out from the ground like a twisted, skeletal hand. A scream caught in your throat, but the air was so thick, so stifling, that it crushed the sound before it could escape. The creature, the one from the forest, was close now, its presence almost palpable. You could feel its eyes on you even though you couldn't see it. You turned back to the path ahead, your breath coming faster as the reality of the situation began to set in. You were trapped. There was no way out, no way back. A figure emerged from the shadows ahead, barely visible, its form shrouded in mist. You could only make out the outline at first, tall and thin, with limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. As it stepped into the dim light, its features became clearer. The figure was humanoid, but it was wrong. Its skin pale and stretched tight across its bones, its face an unreadable mask of silence, save for its glowing eyes. It didn't move toward you immediately. Instead, it stood still, watching, waiting. And in its gaze, you saw something that made your blood run cold. A hunger. An insatiable, ancient hunger that had been waiting for you. You are the offering, it whispered, its voice a cold, rasping breath against the back of your neck. The forest has claimed you. You belong to it now. You wanted to scream, to fight, to break free from the suffocating grip of the forest. But your legs wouldn't obey. Your body was frozen, as though the very air had wrapped itself around you, binding you to the forest. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their shadows stretching, reaching for you, as if the entire forest was conspiring to pull you deeper into its endless void. The figure took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. You felt its presence press against you, suffocating, as though it were closing in, cutting off all escape. "Do you feel it?" it asked, its voice like a rasp of wind through dry leaves. The forest's hunger? The price for entering its heart. And then, with a sudden, sharp motion, it reached out and grabbed your arm. Its touch was ice-cold, sending a shock of paralysis through your veins. The moment its fingers made contact with your skin, the world seemed to tilt, to distort. The trees groaned louder now, their limbs rattling, their leaves rustling in a crescendo of frantic energy. The air around you grew thicker, heavier, as if the very atmosphere was trying to consume you. You gasped for air, but your lungs felt like they were filled with something thick, something suffocating. The forest was alive. It was alive in ways you couldn't understand. And it was hungry. The figure leaned close, its face mere inches from yours. Its hollow eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, its lips curling into something like a grin. "You will join the others," it whispered, the words sending a shiver down your spine. "And in the end, you will become the forest." The world around you seemed to fracture. The trees, the earth, the air, all of it, began to pulse with an energy that was both terrifying and alluring. The whispers, once just a distant murmur, were now a cacophony of voices, filling your mind with a maddening intensity. You could no longer tell where the forest ended and you began. And then the creature pulled you forward. You felt the cold, skeletal fingers wrapped tighter around your arm, the grip of the creature like iron, unyielding. Every attempt to pull away was met with a pressure that only increased, as if the forest itself was feeding off your resistance. The darkness around you thickened, swallowing the light, until all that remained was the pale glow of the creature's eyes, burning like twin orbs in the heart of a storm. The world around you began to blur. It wasn't just the physical world anymore. The trees, the ground, even the air seemed to ripple like a mirage. The forest wasn't a place you could understand through your senses alone. It was a living thing, a force that twisted and reshaped reality as it saw fit. The ground beneath your feet pulsed as if it were breathing. You could feel it, a deep, steady rhythm like the heartbeat of something immense, something far greater than you could comprehend. It was the heartbeat of the forest itself, the ancient force that controlled everything, from the rustling of the leaves to the faintest tremor of the earth. The creature's eyes never left yours as it pulled you further into the forest. It didn't walk, didn't glide. It moved in a way that defied logic, its form stretching and contracting like it was bending the very fabric of the world. You could feel its presence, overwhelming and suffocating, closing in from all sides. The trees around you seemed to bend, their trunks warping as if reacting to the creature's power, their branches clawing at the air like desperate hands. And then, a terrible realization washed over you, you were being led somewhere. The creature wasn't just toying with you. It was guiding you, drawing you deeper into the heart of the forest. The forest that was somehow alive, a vast, pulsating entity, and you were nothing but a small piece of its hunger. Your body ached with a deep, primal fear. You could feel it in your bones, the pull of something ancient, something hungry, urging you to follow. The path ahead became narrower, more treacherous, and you stumbled over roots that seemed to grow taller with every step. The ground seemed to shift beneath your feet, dragging you deeper into the darkness, pulling you toward an unknown end. The whispers grew louder, their voices blending into a chorus of unintelligible sounds. You could make out no individual words, only a mass of thoughts and emotions, all crashing together in a cacophony of maddening intensity. Fear, longing, pain, desperation. And yet, beneath it all, there was something else, something deeper, something older. The forest remembers, the creature rasped, its voice somehow reaching your mind rather than your ears. It remembers those who have come before. It remembers their sins. The air grew colder as you moved deeper, until you could see your breath in the air, a thin mist rising from your lips. It was a chill unlike anything you had ever felt, a cold that pierced to the very marrow of your bones, as if the forest itself was sucking the warmth from your body. Each breath you took was heavy, thick with the scent of decay and the distant tang of something metallic, something blood-soaked. The path twisted, and the trees closed in tighter, their branches clawing at the sky as if trying to pull you into their grasp. You could feel the weight of them, their gnarled limbs reaching for you, but the creature's grip was the only thing that kept you moving forward. The forest wasn't letting you leave. It was holding you, binding you with invisible threads that tangled around your soul. The lodge waits, the creature muttered, its voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. The keeper calls. It is time for you to understand. You didn't want to understand. You didn't want to know what the creature meant, what the lodge held, what the keeper's role was. But the words sunk into your mind like splinters, embedding themselves in the dark recesses of your thoughts. The lodge, the keeper, and that growing, gnawing feeling that you had already crossed some terrible threshold, that you had already stepped beyond the edge of everything you knew. The forest had shifted. You didn't know when, but you could feel it. Something had changed. The very nature of the place had become distorted. The trees no longer stood as they had before. They were twisted, gnarled, their bark slick with dark, viscous sap that seemed to pulse like blood. The leaves rustled with an eerie rhythm, as if they were alive, each movement sharp and deliberate, waiting for something. You had crossed a line. You could feel it now, like an invisible force pressing down on you, forcing you deeper into the forest's clutches. And then you saw it. In the distance, barely visible through the maze of branches, there was a flicker of light. A soft, ghostly glow, so pale that it barely illuminated the darkness around it. It was faint, distant, and yet it pulled at you, stronger than the whispers, stronger than the force of the creature guiding you. It was as though the light had become part of you, woven into your very thoughts. You wanted to move toward it. You wanted to run, to reach out, to feel the warmth it promised. But you couldn't. The creature's grip tightened again, its fingers digging into your arm like icy talons, preventing you from moving forward. It is too late, the creature said, its voice cold and final. The forest has already claimed you. You belong to it now. The light flickered again, brighter this time, but there was something wrong about it. It wasn't a beacon of hope. It was a warning, a signal of something terrible that awaited you beyond the trees. The whispers in the forest intensified, the wind carrying with it words that sounded almost like laughter, low and guttural, as if the forest itself were mocking you. You wanted to look away, to run, to find a way out, but the forest had ensnared you. There was no escape. The ground trembled again, but this time it wasn't a tremor, it was a shudder, as if the entire forest had taken a collective breath, as if it were preparing for something. Something ancient. And then, from the depths of the trees, you heard it, the sound that made your blood freeze. A scream. Not a human scream. Not the cry of an animal. It was something in between, something tortured, something unnatural. The sound echoed through the forest, vibrating through your chest, and you could feel it deep in your soul. It was a scream of agony, a scream of someone, or something, that had been lost to the forest long ago. The creature's eyes gleamed, its grip still tight around your arm. The keeper is waiting, it whispered. And now, so are you. The scream echoed again, this time louder, more piercing. It sent a chill so deep into your bones that you felt it in your teeth. It was the scream of something trapped, something tortured by time itself. The creature's grip didn't loosen, and with every step you took deeper into the forest, the sound seemed to reverberate through the very ground beneath you, pulling you further into the grip of the forest's malevolent force. You tried to tear your arm away, but the creature's hold tightened with a terrifying finality, and you couldn't move. There was no escape. The air thickened, the weight of it pushing down on your chest until it felt as if you were breathing through water. Every breath was a struggle, every movement sluggish, as if the forest itself was trying to drown you in its oppressive, suffocating embrace. The light ahead, the pale, flickering glow, was now a steady pulse like a heartbeat. It throbbed through the trees, its rhythm in sync with the pounding of your own heart. Each beat felt like a countdown, and with each step you took toward it, the sound of that scream grew louder, more frantic. It wasn't just a cry of pain, it was a cry for help, a cry for release. But where was it coming from? and what was waiting for you in the shadows. The creature seemed to sense your hesitation, and it pulled you forward, forcing you to keep moving. The trees around you bent, their branches twisting as if alive, and the whispers from the depths of the forest grew louder, louder still. You could feel the weight of their words, the presence of something watching, something ancient and malevolent. "It is not far now," the creature rasped, its voice laced with something like anticipation. "The keeper awaits. You will understand soon." You wanted to ask what it meant. You wanted to scream, to shout, to demand answers. But your voice wouldn't come. The silence pressed in on you, the whispers louder than any words you could form. The path was narrow now, the trees on either side so thick that they seemed to press together, forming a twisted tunnel, a corridor leading into the unknown. And then, ahead, you saw it. The clearing. It opened up suddenly, a vast expanse surrounded by trees that twisted at unnatural angles, their roots breaking the surface of the ground like jagged bones. In the center of the clearing stood a structure. No, not a structure, but a thing, tall and dark, made of wood that was ancient and gnarled. Its shape was hard to define, as if it was constantly shifting, as though it didn't belong in the world at all. It was the lodge. But it wasn't just any lodge. It was more like a shrine, or a prison. The walls were covered in dark, oozing moss, and the air around it was thick with a sense of something terrible, something that pulled at the edges of your mind, whispering secrets you didn't want to hear. There were no windows, only jagged openings, black holes that seemed to stare back at you as if daring you to enter. And there, standing before the lodge, was the keeper. The keeper was not human. It wasn't even a creature you could fully comprehend. Its form was ever-changing, like smoke swirling in a storm, its shape indistinct and shifting with every heartbeat. But there were eyes, countless eyes, glowing faintly, peering out from the shifting darkness like stars in the void. Was watching you. The creature that had guided you here released its hold on your arm, and you stumbled forward, your legs weak beneath you. You could barely keep your footing as you gazed upon the keeper, its presence pressing down on you like a physical weight. The air around it seemed to warp and distort, the very atmosphere thickening, as though it were trying to keep you from breathing. "You have come," the keeper's voice echoed, not in words but in feelings, sharp, piercing emotions that flooded your mind like a torrent. "You have come to understand." The forest around you seemed to react to its words, the trees groaning and shifting as if they were alive, breathing with the keeper. The air itself seemed to thicken, becoming more oppressive, more suffocating with every passing second. The whispers from the trees grew louder, more frantic, and for the first time you understood them, not as individual voices but as a collective scream, a chorus of souls bound to this place, to the forest's insatiable hunger. "You are here because you belong," the keeper continued, its voice now a low, rumbling hum that seemed to vibrate through your chest. "You are not the first to walk this path, and you will not be the last." It stepped forward, or rather, it shifted forward, its form stretching and twisting as it moved toward you. The air grew colder with every step, and the ground beneath your feet seemed to tremble, as if it were alive, as if the very forest were aware of the keeper's presence. "The forest calls its children," the keeper whispered, its voice now a ghostly caress in your ear. "And you have answered. But not all who come here leave." You felt the weight of its words sink into your mind, the meaning of them hanging like a shroud. What had you come here for? What was the true purpose of this forest? Why had you been pulled into this nightmarish place, where the rules of reality bent and twisted under the forest's influence? The keeper's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, everything went still, unnervingly still. The whispers stopped. The trees stopped groaning. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. And then it spoke again, its voice a terrible whisper that sent a shock of cold through your spine. "You will join the others." The words hung in the air, pregnant with meaning, as the keeper extended a long, shadowy hand toward you. You felt a pulse of energy, a jolt that went through your entire being, as if the forest itself was reaching inside you, searching for something vital. For a moment, you thought you might collapse, that the pressure of the forest's gaze might shatter you. But something inside you, something primal and desperate, fought back. You took a step back, though your legs trembled. You had to escape. There had to be a way out. But as you moved, the earth beneath your feet began to shift again. The ground trembled, the trees swaying as though they were alive, closing in on you from all sides. The keeper didn't move. It just watched, its glowing eyes never leaving yours, its form swirling like smoke, ever-changing, ever-present. "The forest does not release its children," it said, the words carrying a weight that crushed your chest. "You are bound to it now, just as they were." And in that moment, you knew with a terrible certainty, there was no leaving. The forest had claimed you, and it had no intention of letting you go. The ground beneath you shifted once more, and a wave of unease washed over you. The keeper's eyes never left yours, and the darkness around you seemed to grow deeper with every passing second. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something ancient, a smell that clung to your skin and made your stomach churn. The very presence of the keeper, standing before you, felt like an overwhelming weight pressing down on your chest, suffocating you with its intensity. There was no escape. The forest had spoken, and you were its prisoner. It was an undeniable truth, one that settled into your bones, cold and heavy. The whispering voices of the trees, once faint and distant, now rang clear in your mind. The faces of those who had come before you flickered in the edges of your vision, shadowy figures trapped between the branches, lost to time, their eyes hollow, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. They were the children of the forest, and now so were you. The keeper's form seemed to shift with each heartbeat, its body stretching and contorting like smoke caught in an unseen breeze. It was a fluid, ever-changing being, existing between moments, between worlds, and the very sight of it was enough to make your skin crawl. The eyes that glimmered in its shifting form were not just eyes. They were windows, revealing glimpses of things otherworldly, things that existed beyond human comprehension. "Do you see them?" The keeper's voice rumbled, not from its mouth, but from within the very air around you. "They were once like you. They walked the path, and now they are part of it. Bound to the forest, bound to me." The words swirled around you like a storm, swirling in your mind, becoming a part of your very thoughts. You could feel the presence of the others now, their eyes watching from the trees, their hollow gazes fixed on you. Were they real? Were they souls trapped in the forest, or merely echoes of those who had been claimed before you? "You will understand," the keeper continued, its voice low and drawn out, like the wind through dead branches. "All will be revealed in time. You will join the others just as they did." A terrible pressure built in your chest as you tried to move, but your legs felt heavy, sluggish. The very earth seemed to hold you in place, your feet sinking slightly into the soft, damp ground. The trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches casting long, twisted shadows that stretched toward you like dark fingers, seeking to pull you deeper into the forest. You tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, like it was saturated with something dark and oppressive. Your heart raced in your chest, pounding so hard you thought it might burst. You could feel it, the pull of the forest, the way it reached for you, wanted you, needed you to become part of it. And then the whispers began again. At first, they were faint, indistinct murmurs, like the wind rustling through the leaves. But soon the voices grew louder, and you could hear them more clearly. They were screams, but not the kind of screams you would expect. They were silent screams, the kind of screams that could only exist in the deepest part of your mind, trapped in the void between the living and the dead. These were the cries of the lost souls, the ones who had come before you and who were now part of the forest, bound to its endless hunger. "They are all around you," the keeper whispered. "The ones who never left. The ones who walked the path and were claimed." You looked around, desperate to see anything that could offer you a glimpse of what was real, of what was safe, but the forest closed in around you. The trees were no longer just trees, they were eyes, and you could feel their gaze on you, heavy and cold. The ground beneath you seemed to shift, and you realized with a sickening jolt that you weren't standing on solid earth anymore. You were sinking, the soil beneath your feet becoming soft, spongy, as though the forest was swallowing you whole. "The forest claims its children," the keeper repeated, its voice like a death knell. "And now you belong to it. You belong to me." The words echoed in your mind, twisting and distorting, like a chorus of tormented souls. And then you felt it, the change. It was subtle at first, but then it became undeniable. The very essence of your being began to shift. The air around you seemed to warp, bending and twisting, as though reality itself was cracking. You could feel the forest's energy seeping into your very bones, changing you, transforming you into something other. And then you heard it again, the scream. But this time it was different. It was not a single scream. It was 1,000 screams rising up from the depths of the earth, rising from the very heart of the forest. It was a scream that came from within you, a scream of terror and agony that had always been there, buried deep in your subconscious, waiting to break free. The trees around you began to shudder, their trunks creaking and groaning as though the forest itself was alive, alive in a way that no living being should be. The branches reached toward you, their limbs like twisted fingers, pulling you deeper into the earth, into the soil that was now softening, becoming more like quicksand. Your feet sunk into the ground, and you could feel the cool, damp earth closing around your ankles, pulling you down, dragging you deeper into the forest's embrace. "You are bound to me now," the keeper said, its voice low and insistent, wrapping around your mind like a cold, suffocating fog. There is no turning back. The forest is yours, and you are its. You tried to scream, but your throat was dry, your body unresponsive. Your hands, too, seemed to be losing their strength, trembling as the forest's energy seeped into your veins, flooding your body with a chilling cold. The keeper stepped closer, its form shifting, its eyes burning brighter than ever. "You are one of us," it whispered, its voice filling every corner of your mind. "You will walk the path. You will never leave. You will never be alone." The darkness around you seemed to expand, the very forest itself closing in, the trees pressing in from all sides, blocking out the light. You were trapped. The keeper's presence filled your vision, its form now a swirling mass of shadow and smoke, its eyes glowing with an unholy light that consumed everything around you. And then, with a sickening lurch, you felt yourself being pulled. It wasn't just the forest anymore. It was the very earth beneath you, the roots of the trees, all working in unison to drag you deeper, to claim you, to swallow you whole. You could feel the pull in your very soul. The forest was you now, and you were the forest. There was no escape, no way out. You were a part of it, and you always would be. The earth beneath your feet shifted again, but this time there was no tremor, no warning. The ground simply gave way, pulling you downward as though the soil itself had become a living thing, hungry, eager to consume. You staggered, but there was no solid ground beneath you to catch your fall. The forest's grasp was absolute, pulling you deeper into its heart, further from the world you once knew. The keeper's presence was overwhelming. Its form was now a swirl of darkness, its shifting limbs flowing like liquid shadows, stretching in ways that defied comprehension. It loomed over you, and in that moment you could feel it inside you, the weight of its power pressing against your very core, seeping into your soul, corrupting it. The forest around you hummed, vibrating with a dark, sinister energy, as though the very earth was alive, aware of your every movement. The trees groaned, their bark cracking like thunder as their roots wriggled beneath the soil, reaching for you. You could feel them tugging at your legs, pulling at your bones, and for the first time you realized they weren't just trees. They were part of it. The forest wasn't a place you could walk through. It wasn't just a backdrop to the horrors you'd witnessed. It was an entity, alive and sentient, with a mind of its own. And now you were part of it. You have become one with the roots. The keeper's voice echoed in your mind, its words like poison dripping into your thoughts. The forest has claimed you. You will walk its path, and you will never leave. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a threat. It was a truth, one that filled you with a dread so deep, so consuming, that it stole the breath from your lungs. The forest's grip was tightening, pulling at your soul, at your very essence, claiming you as its own. You could feel it now, every whisper in the trees, every rustle of the leaves. They weren't just noises. They were voices, ancient voices, speaking to you in ways you couldn't understand, yet you could feel them deep in your chest, vibrating through your bones. You tried to move, to fight back, but your body wouldn't obey. Your legs were stiff, frozen, and when you looked down, you saw the roots of the trees wrapping around your ankles, their tendrils like cold, wet fingers, pulling you further into the earth. The soil beneath you felt soft at first, but now it was firm, unyielding, as though it were solidifying, sealing you into the forest's depths. You could feel the weight of the forest pressing against you, dragging you down, burying you alive, as though the earth itself wanted to consume you. "There is no escape," the keeper's voice whispered, low and terrible. "Not for you. Not for anyone." The sound of the words reverberated in your mind, becoming a chant, a mantra, repeating over and over like a lullaby for the lost. The air around you became thick, pressing down on you from all sides, suffocating as if the very atmosphere was trying to consume you. Your chest tightened, your breath shallow, but there was nothing to do. No way to fight back. The keeper moved closer, its form swirling around you like smoke, its glowing eyes burning with an intensity that made your skin crawl. Its voice was inside you now, not just echoing in your mind, but in your very soul. You could feel it, the forest will pressing down on you, reshaping you, changing you. "You are part of me now," the keeper hissed, its voice curling around your thoughts like a serpent. "Just as they were. Just as everyone who has ever entered this place." You wanted to scream. You wanted to fight, to tear yourself free from the forest's grasp. But the forest didn't allow defiance. It didn't allow resistance. It had been here long before you, and it would remain long after you were gone. The trees, the roots, they had been waiting. And now you were theirs. You could feel the forest's ancient hunger, its insatiable desire to consume, to bind, to keep you here forever. The ground beneath you shifted again, and this time it wasn't just the soil, it was your body. You could feel your limbs growing heavier, your flesh slowing as though the forest was slowly taking you in. Your heart pounded in your chest, but it was no longer your heart. It was the forest's heart, pulsing with the rhythm of an ancient, endless cycle. Every beat was a reminder that you were no longer free. You were part of the forest's pulse, its living, breathing hunger. You stumbled forward, your legs shaking with the weight of it all. And then you heard it. A click. It was soft at first, but as you strained to listen, it grew louder, clearer. A sound like branches snapping, roots twisting, as if the very earth was preparing to claim you. And then, in an instant, you realized what the sound was. It was the door. Ahead of you, through the trees, you could just make out a silhouette, a structure half hidden in the shadows. It wasn't just a lodge anymore. It was a gate, a portal, the entrance to something far darker, something beyond the forest itself. The keeper had been guiding you here all along, not just to the heart of the forest, but to this place, this threshold. The keeper waits, the keeper whispered, its voice dripping with malice. The one who governs the path. You could feel it now, the weight of the place, the gravity pulling you toward it. It wasn't just the trees. It wasn't just the keeper. There was something beyond them, something older still, waiting for you beyond the door. Something that had been watching you, following you from the very beginning. Something that was waiting for you to cross the line. You must enter, the keeper said, its voice like a death sentence. There is no turning back. Once you cross, you belong to the forest. Forever. With your heart racing in your chest, you took a step forward. You didn't want to move. You couldn't want to move. But your feet carried you anyway, as though your body were no longer your own. The trees closed in around you, their branches like claws reaching for you, pulling you toward the doorway, toward whatever waited on the other side. You could feel the keeper watching, its eyes glowing with dark satisfaction, as the door creaked open with a sound like the cracking of bones. The forest was alive, and it was waiting for you to become a part of it, body, soul, and mind. And as you crossed the threshold, you felt it. The forest had you. It always had. You were its. The air changed as soon as you crossed the threshold, thickening with a heavy, oppressive presence that made your chest feel like it was being crushed by the weight of something ancient. The door creaked shut behind you with an unsettling finality, the sound of wood grinding against wood echoing in the hollow, suffocating silence that followed. You were no longer in the forest. Not entirely, at least. You were somewhere else, somewhere deeper. Somewhere that existed outside the world you had once known. The ground beneath your feet was different now, solid stone, slick with moisture, slick with something other. It seemed to hum beneath your weight, vibrating with the pulse of something living, something that had been waiting for you, for all who crossed this threshold. It was as though the very foundation of this place had been crafted with purpose, to ensnare, to trap, to bind. The walls around you were made of ancient stone, dark and worn, their surfaces covered in thick moss and creeping vines that seemed to shift, to watch you with their twisted forms. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, but also something more, something bitter, metallic, like the tang of blood in the air. It filled your senses, crawling into your nostrils, into your lungs, until it was all you could taste, all you could feel. It was everywhere. The keeper's presence lingered at the edge of your awareness, its shadowy form always just out of sight. It wasn't speaking anymore, but you could feel it, its hunger, its need for you to stay, to become a part of the forest, a part of its endless cycle. Its whispers were still in your mind, low and insistent, pressing against your thoughts, crawling through your skull like worms. It was waiting for you to understand, to accept the truth of what you had become. You looked around, trying to make sense of your surroundings, but the more you looked, the more the room seemed to shift. The walls seemed to breathe, and the stone beneath your feet felt alive, wriggling like something that was not meant to be touched by human hands. You could feel the weight of time in this place. It was ancient, older than the forest itself, older than anything you had ever imagined. And it was alive. It was waiting for you. At the far end of the room, a massive figure stood in the shadows, its outline barely visible against the flickering light that danced in the corner of your vision. The figure was tall, towering above you, and its form seemed to be made of the very darkness itself. It was humanoid, but its features were indistinct, blurred like a shape caught in the fog. Its eyes, however, burned with an unnatural light, pale, sickly white, like the moon on a stormy night. They pierced through the darkness, staring straight at you. "You are here," the figure's voice rumbled, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to resonate with the very stones around you. "I have been waiting." Your heart skipped a beat, a wave of cold fear washing over you as you realized that this was no ordinary being. This was the true keeper of the forest, the one who had stood at its heart for countless ages. The one who ruled the dark spaces between the trees, who guided the forest's endless hunger, and whose presence shaped the very land. The forest is old, the figure continued, its voice deepening as it spoke. It has grown with time. It has fed on the lost, the wandering souls who dared to enter. But it is more than that. It took a step toward you, and with every movement the air grew colder, heavier. The shadows deepened, pooling around its feet, as if it drew the very light from the room into itself. The forest is a living thing, it said, its voice echoing in your mind. It is an entity older than any of your kind. It has fed on the souls of those who were lost, and now it feeds on you. And soon you will become part of it. The air around you began to swirl, as if the very space itself was warping, bending to the will of the keeper. You could feel it, the forest's power seeping from the walls, from the ground, from the air itself. It was everywhere, a presence you couldn't escape. And it was growing stronger, its hunger reaching into you, searching for something, claiming something that belonged to the forest. The keeper stepped closer, its eyes glowing brighter now, until they filled your vision, until they became the only thing you could see. There was no escape from its gaze. "You are not the first," the keeper said softly, its voice a low murmur that seemed to echo in your very soul. "There were others before you. They came seeking shelter, seeking refuge from the storm. They thought the forest was a place of peace, a place to rest. But the forest has no mercy. The forest gives nothing." It raised a hand, and you could feel the temperature drop. The chill in the air deepened, becoming a biting cold that seemed to settle in your bones, making your body tremble involuntarily. It was as if the forest had claimed your warmth, just as it had claimed the warmth of all those who had come before you. "And now you belong to it," the keeper whispered, a sinister smile curling its features. "You are bound as they were. There is no escape." The walls around you groaned, the stone vibrating as though the very structure was alive, breathing with the weight of countless years. The ground beneath you trembled again, and the ceiling above seemed to grow closer, the shadows pressing in, suffocating. You wanted to scream, to fight, but your body wouldn't move. You could feel your strength draining away, as though the forest was leeching the very life from you. The keeper stepped forward once more, its presence so overwhelming that you felt it in the pit of your stomach, like the sense of something ancient and terrible drawing near. "You are the forest now," it said, its voice a low hiss, its eyes piercing through you. "You will never leave. You will become one of the lost souls, wandering the trees, feeding the hunger of the forest. Forever." Your thoughts began to fragment, scattered like leaves in the wind. The whispers in the walls, in the very earth beneath you, became louder, more insistent. They were voices, hundreds of voices, crying out in agony, in fear, in despair. The souls who had come before you, who had entered this place with the same hopes, the same fears as you had. And now they were here, trapped in the forest, bound to it forever, just as you were about to be. "The path has claimed you," the keeper intoned, its voice resonating like a bell tolling in the distance. "The forest will never let you go. You are its." And then, in the depths of the darkness, you saw them, the others. They were standing in the shadows, their faces hidden beneath the hoods of tattered cloaks, their eyes glowing with the same sickly white light as the keeper's. They were the lost souls, the ones who had wandered into the forest long before you, and now they were part of it, just as you were about to be. Their faces were blank, expressionless, as if they had forgotten who they were, as if the forest had taken everything from them. They stepped forward, their movements slow and deliberate, their eyes fixed on you as if they were welcoming you into their ranks. You realized with a deep sense of horror that this was your fate. You had entered the forest, and now you were part of it, a child of the forest, destined to wander its endless paths, lost in the shadows, feeding its hunger for eternity. The keeper's laughter echoed in the depths of your mind, a sound that sent a shiver down your spine. You belong to the forest now. The forest's pulse, its beat reverberated through your very soul. You could feel it in your chest, in your bones, a rhythm that was no longer yours. It was the rhythm of the ancient, the eternal, the hunger that had existed long before you and would continue long after. The keeper's presence loomed over you, its shadow falling across your every thought, every breath, as though it was inside you now, spreading its dark influence through your mind like a poison. The lost souls gathered around you, their eyes glowing with that same unnatural light, their faces pale, hollow, and empty. They didn't move like living beings. They moved like shadows, as though they were no longer quite human, no longer a part of this world. They were echoes, remnants of those who had crossed this threshold before you, each one now bound to the forest, slaves to its insatiable hunger. You wanted to scream. You wanted to fight, to claw your way out of this nightmare, but every time you tried to move, your body grew heavier, like it was being pulled by the earth itself, like the forest was sinking its roots deep into your soul, claiming you in ways you couldn't comprehend. Your thoughts, your very self, were slipping away, eroding like sand in the wind, and every time you tried to hold on to something, to remember who you were, it felt like a part of you was lost, swallowed by the forest's endless grasp. The forest takes what it wants, the keeper said, its voice growing softer, yet more sinister, like the rustling of dead leaves. It takes the lost, the broken, the souls who wandered too far. And now it takes you. You are no longer a stranger here. You belong. The words sank deep into you, settling like a dark weight in your chest. The keeper's form loomed, shifting between light and shadow, its many eyes burning with that same sickly, unblinking glow. Its gaze was unwavering, its presence overwhelming, and for a moment, it felt as though it was the forest, the very embodiment of its power and hunger, everything that you had feared. The souls around you began to move again, their hollow gazes fixed on you, their movements slow and deliberate. They circled you, their bodies swaying like the trees in the wind, their forms flickering in and out of focus. You could hear their whispers, faint at first but growing louder, until the sound was a maddening cacophony in your mind. Join us, join us. There was a chant, a mantra, a prayer repeated over and over, each word soaking into you, filling the empty spaces in your mind. You could feel their voices crawling beneath your skin, twisting inside you as though they were marking you, binding you to them, to the forest. Each breath you took felt like a slow surrender, as though the very air was thickening, turning to sap, slowing you down, draining your will. You will walk the path. The keeper's voice boomed once more, breaking through the endless whispers. The forest's hunger is endless. It will never be satisfied. And you, child, you are its next feast. The figure before you took a step closer, and the ground beneath your feet shifted again, as if the earth was moving, reshaping itself with each word it spoke. The stone floor cracked, splintering like dry bark, revealing a dark void beneath, a pit that seemed to stretch down into the abyss itself. From the depths of that pit, you could hear the faintest echoes, distant, mournful cries, as though the earth itself was weeping. The keeper raised one hand, and the shadows around you seemed to writhe, coiling and twisting like serpents. They reached for you, their forms stretching, bending, alive, and you felt their touch, cold, clammy, slick like wet stones. The sensation of them wrapping around your limbs, pulling at your chest, was like the very forest pressing into you, its roots burrowing into your skin. The path does not end, the keeper whispered, its voice now a cold breath against your ear. It begins with you. You will walk it as they did, and you will feed the forest. Forever. The floor beneath your feet gave way once more, the stone crumbling like ash, and you fell, falling through the darkness, through a space that was neither earth nor air. It was as though the very fabric of reality had torn open, revealing a world beyond, one that was not bound by the laws of nature. You plummeted, not toward a destination, but toward the very heart of the forest. Toward its core, where the hunger was the strongest, where the forest fed on the lost and the broken. And then, as suddenly as it began, you stopped. The ground was soft, wet like mud, no worse than mud. It was slick, viscous, almost alive. It clung to your skin, to your clothes, wrapping around you like the very essence of the forest was consuming you from the inside out. The air was thick with an unnatural stench, the scent of something decaying, something rotting, and you could taste it on your tongue, bitter and sour, the taste of death. You could feel it now, the weight of the forest's hunger, the pull of its insatiable need. The trees towered over you, their gnarled limbs stretching toward the sky, but it wasn't the sky you saw now. It was a swirling mass of dark clouds, of shadow, churning like a storm without wind, without light. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and above you, the stars flickered faintly, like dying embers in the void. You are here, the keeper's voice said again, its tone heavy with satisfaction. And now you are part of the forest's eternal hunger. You will feed it and it will feed you. Together we will grow. Forever. The ground beneath you seemed to tremble again, and you could feel it, the pull, the deep hunger growing stronger, reaching deeper into you. You could feel it in your chest, your throat, the aching gnaw of emptiness that echoed in your mind, in your very being. The keeper stepped forward, its form rippling like smoke, but its eyes were always there, always burning, always watching, and you knew deep in your soul that there was no escape, no salvation. You had crossed the threshold, and now you were bound to the forest's eternal, unyielding hunger. As the darkness closed in around you, the voices of the lost souls began their chant once more, rising and falling like the wind in the trees. Join us, join us. And you realized with a sickening certainty that you already had. The forest was no longer just around you, it was you. The air, the ground, the very essence of the place seemed to seep into your being, saturating your thoughts, your breath. The hunger, that relentless gnawing ache, pulsed within you, making every breath feel like an effort, every thought a struggle. You were aware, more than you ever had been before, of the forest's ancient power, the weight of its presence, the endless, suffocating grasp that stretched out across the world, claiming all who entered. The keeper stood before you, its form an ever-shifting mass of shadow and smoke, its eyes glowing like the pale light of dying stars. The earth beneath you groaned, the ground pulsing with an unnatural rhythm that echoed in the very marrow of your bones. The trees above swayed, their branches creaking in unison, their roots stretching deep into the earth, like tendrils that had been buried for millennia. The forest was alive, breathing, and it was waiting. You are part of the forest now, the keeper's voice hummed, its words a constant murmur in your mind, as though it had become a part of your very thoughts. You belong to it. You belong to me. Your feet sank deeper into the wet, viscous earth, the ground sucking at your legs like the forest was trying to swallow you whole. You could feel the tendrils of the trees stretching toward you, their gnarled fingers reaching out from the darkness to touch you, to mark you as one of their own. The very air seemed to press against you, thick with the scent of decay, of rot, of something ancient and foul. It clung to your skin, soaked into your bones, and there was no escaping it. You were in it now, part of it. And yet, even as you felt the weight of it all, you could still sense something else. Something deeper, darker, something lurking beneath the surface. It was an unspoken presence, a force that had always been here, long before the keeper, long before the forest as you knew it. It was older, ancient, and it watched. The keeper raised a hand, and the air shifted. The darkness around you deepened, and the very ground seemed to shift, as though it was part of some larger, hidden mechanism. A low, rumbling sound echoed from beneath the earth, like a distant growl, the noise vibrating through your chest. The walls of the hollow trembled with the intensity of it, the trees shaking in silent anticipation, as though the forest itself had begun to stir. The true heart of the forest lies below, the keeper intoned, its voice a deep, rumbling echo in the hollow. And soon you will see it for yourself. You felt a tug, a pull from beneath the earth, as though something was calling you, something buried deep within the roots of the trees, deep within the soil, something that had been waiting for you. The hunger in the air intensified, the very atmosphere thick with a suffocating pressure that crushed against your ribs, making it hard to breathe. Your mind felt heavy, as though it were being pulled toward that deep, hidden place, where the true essence of the forest awaited. You could hear it now beneath the ground, the whispering. The voices, not the lost souls that wandered the trees, but something else, something older, something more malevolent. It was like the sound of dry leaves crackling in the wind, but there was an undertone to it, something wrong, something that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. It calls to you, the keeper said, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. It has called to all who have come before you. And now it calls to you. The earth beneath your feet quaked again, and you stumbled, your feet slipping in the slick, viscous mud. You tried to regain your balance, but the ground seemed to shift beneath you, pulling you forward, deeper into the hollow, deeper into the forest's insatiable maw. The trees around you groaned, their branches reaching out like claws, brushing against your skin with cold, dead fingers. The air grew colder, and the whispers in the walls, in the very earth itself, grew louder. Join us, the voices whispered over and over again, their tone a mixture of yearning and despair. Join us. There was no way out, no escape. The keeper stepped forward, its shadowy form swirling around you, its eyes glowing brighter, burning with an intensity that seared through your soul. You could feel it now, the pull of the forest, the deep, insatiable hunger that gnawed at the edges of your consciousness. It wasn't just the keeper. It was the forest itself, its tendrils stretching through your mind, taking root, sinking deep into your thoughts. It was as though the forest had become a part of you, a parasite feeding on your very essence. You will see, the keeper's voice whispered, its words slipping into your mind like ice water. You will see what lies beneath. You will see the heart of the forest, and you will understand. The ground beneath you trembled again, and with a violent lurch, you felt yourself falling. The earth beneath you cracked open, and you plunged down into the darkness, falling faster and faster, as though the very forest was swallowing you whole. You could feel the air rushing past you, the wind whipping at your face, but there was no light, no direction. It was just darkness, thick and suffocating, closing in around you like a tomb. And then, as quickly as it had begun, you stopped. The darkness pressed in all around you, and you felt the weight of it, the weight of the forest's hunger. It was everywhere now, filling the air, seeping into your skin, into your soul. You could feel the pulse of it beneath your feet, beneath the very ground, like the heartbeat of something alive, something ancient and malevolent. The whispers came again, louder this time, a chorus of voices that filled your mind, drowning out everything else. They were inside you now, their cries filling your thoughts, their yearning pressing against your chest like a vice. You could feel their desperation, their agony, and you knew that they were not just echoes. They were real, they were alive in this place, bound to the forest's insatiable hunger. Join us. And then, from the darkness ahead, you saw it. A light, flickering like a distant star far below you. It was the faintest glow, barely visible, but it was there, pulling you forward. Your body moved on its own, your legs carrying you toward the light, the pulse of the forest driving you forward. As you drew closer, the light grew brighter, and you realized it was not a star. It was not a flickering flame. It was something else. It was the heart of the forest. It pulsed with a terrible, inescapable rhythm, like the beating of a monstrous heart. You could feel it deep in your chest, the rhythm syncing with your own. You could feel the hunger, the power, the life of it. And it was waiting for you. The light ahead grew brighter, drawing you in like a moth to a flame, but it wasn't a warm, comforting glow. No, this was a cold, unnatural brilliance, an unsettling light that seemed to burn your very soul. As you moved toward it, the air around you thickened, swirling like smoke, and the ground beneath your feet pulsed with each step, as if the earth itself was alive, aware of your every movement. The pull was irresistible, the force of it sinking deep into your chest, as though the forest was pulling you toward something that had been waiting for eons. The whispers grew louder, their voices pressing against your skull like the weight of 1,000 unseen hands. They were no longer just distant murmurs. They were real now, their cold fingers gripping your mind, their words slithering into your thoughts like dark tendrils. Join us. The words weren't a plea. They weren't a demand. They were a truth. The forest had claimed you just as it had claimed those before you. It had been waiting, patient, for you to accept it, to become one with it. The darkness you had felt, the weight of the forest pressing against you, was not just a part of the place. It was the place itself, the heartbeat of the land, the rhythm of its hunger. You were no longer just an intruder. You were part of it. You were becoming it. The air around you shimmered, and the light ahead expanded, revealing the true nature of what lay before you. It was a vast, hollowed space, a cavernous chamber where the earth had split open to reveal the pulsing heart of the forest. It was not a tree. It was not a stone. It was something else entirely, something alive, something ancient, dark. The heart of the forest throbbed, a monstrous mass of twisted roots and veins, pulsating with a terrible living energy. The light came from within it, an unnatural glow that seeped through cracks in its surface, casting eerie shadows across the walls. It was as if the heart itself was the forest, a living, breathing thing that had existed long before humanity had even begun to dream of it. The walls of the cavern were covered in veins of gold, thick and glistening, like the blood vessels of some massive creature. They pulsed in rhythm with the heart, and as you stepped closer, you felt your own heart sync with it like a drumbeat echoing in your chest. The whispers continued, louder now, swirling around you like a storm of voices. They were coming from the heart itself, voices of the lost, of those who had entered this place and never left, those who had become part of the forest's insatiable hunger. Their cries were muffled, distant, but unmistakable. They were trapped, bound to the forest, lost within its vast, eternal grasp. You are here, they whispered, their voices blending with the hum of the heart. You are part of us now. You reached out a trembling hand, drawn to the pulsating light, to the heart of the forest. The moment your fingers touched the surface, a jolt of cold electricity shot through your arm, making your entire body spasm with shock. The heart reacted to your touch, the veins beneath its surface shimmering, glowing brighter, and the ground around you trembled violently, as if the entire cavern was shaking with anticipation. Kneel. It had known you the moment you crossed the threshold. The forest had marked you, had claimed you, and now it was calling you to this moment, to the center of its hunger, to the very core of its being. The whispers intensified, growing louder until they were a cacophony of desperate voices, rising up from the depths of the earth. They were begging, pleading for you to understand, for you to accept your place. But you could no longer tell whether they were human or something else entirely. Their cries were twisted, distorted, as though they had been here too long, trapped in the heart of the forest, their bodies broken and their souls shattered. Feed us, join us, they pleaded, their voices turning into a low, guttural chant that echoed in your mind. The heartbeat of the forest quickened, the rhythm of the veins beneath the earth speeding up, becoming frantic. And you realized with a deep sense of horror, the forest was alive. It was a being, an ancient, insatiable creature, and you were the next piece to be consumed. The ground beneath you began to crack, the earth splitting open in jagged lines, as though the very fabric of the world was tearing apart. From the cracks, roots began to emerge, thick, blackened tendrils that writhed like serpents, reaching toward you with alarming speed. You could feel them inside you now, creeping beneath your skin, burrowing into your veins, filling your body with a cold, terrible energy. You tried to scream, but the air was thick, suffocating, pressing against your lungs. It was as though the very space was closing in on you, trapping you in the heart of the forest, where there was no escape. Your limbs were heavy, your body trembling as the roots began to wrap around you, pulling you closer to the pulsating heart at the center of the cavern. You could feel them tightening, their grip cold and unyielding, and as they dug into your flesh, you realized you were becoming part of the forest. You were being absorbed into it, your body merging with the earth. And then, through the pain, through the horror, you understood. The heart of the forest wasn't just the center of its power, it was the source of its hunger. It was the thing that fed, the insatiable creature that devoured everything it touched, transforming those it consumed into a part of itself. The lost souls, the wandering travelers, the broken-hearted fools who had thought they could find solace here. They were gone, their bodies swallowed by the forest, their essence absorbed into its eternal, unyielding hunger. And now it was your turn. The roots tightened around your chest, pulling at your ribs, digging into your skin. You felt your breath grow shallow, your body weakening as the life drained from you, absorbed into the heart, into the forest. The light from the heart burned through your eyes, filling your vision with a blinding glow that seemed to dissolve everything around you. The whispers faded into a dull hum, and then, silence. You were one with the forest now, lost in its dark, endless embrace. Your soul, your very being, had been consumed by its hunger, and there was no longer a way to separate where you ended and the forest began. You were part of it, its power, its hunger, its eternal cycle of consumption. And in that silence, you felt the forest's heartbeat quicken once more. It was waiting for the next wanderer to cross its threshold. The silence in the cavern stretched out, vast and suffocating, but even in the stillness, you could feel the heartbeat of the forest. It was no longer just a pulse in the air, it was in you, resonating through your bones, your blood, a rhythm that you could not escape. The very earth beneath your feet thrummed with life, with hunger, with power. It was the power of the ancient, the unyielding, and it was now part of you. You could no longer distinguish where your body ended and the forest began. The roots had fused with your veins, the dark tendrils sinking deep into your flesh, intertwining with your soul, spreading through you like poison. The pain had been sharp and immediate, a jagged twist of agony that left you gasping for breath. But now, the pain had settled into something deeper, something more sinister. It was as though your every thought, your every feeling was no longer just yours. The forest had claimed you, body and soul, and in return, it had granted you a piece of its terrible, eternal power. The whispers came again, soft at first, but growing louder, their voices now inside you, crawling beneath your skin. They were the voices of the lost, the broken, those who had come before you, who had crossed the threshold and become part of the forest's insatiable hunger. You could feel them, their presence deep within you, their fragmented thoughts weaving in and out of your own. They were not gone. They were with you now always. Their voices echoed in your mind, murmuring the same words over and over. Join us, become one with us, feed the forest. You wanted to scream, to push them out, but you couldn't. The forest had woven them into your very being. Their agony was now your agony. Their hunger, your hunger. And it was vast. You could feel it gnawing at your insides, a constant reminder that you were no longer just a person. You were a part of the forest now, an extension of its will, its hunger. And then, as if on cue, the earth shifted again. The heart of the forest pulsed in rhythm with your own heart, the veins beneath the ground growing brighter, flickering with that same sickly light that had filled the cavern. The walls around you seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like the lungs of some great, terrible creature. The very air was thick with the scent of decay, of rot, of something ancient and forgotten. It was the smell of the forest's hunger, and it was yours now. The cavern seemed to stretch out before you, its walls twisting and warping, the trees around you growing taller, their branches reaching out like dark fingers, scratching at the sky. You could hear the rustling of leaves, the creaking of wood, the whisper of the forest's voice. It was calling to you, pulling you deeper into its dark heart. It is time, the keeper's voice echoed, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through your very being. The forest calls to you. It is time to feed. Time to become one with the eternal hunger. You wanted to fight it, to resist, but you knew you couldn't. The forest's will was now your will. The hunger that had been eating at you from the inside was part of you now, a gnawing emptiness that needed to be filled. And the only way to satisfy it was to feed, to draw others into the forest, to guide them to the heart, just as you had been led. You would trap them, bind them to the forest, and their souls would become part of it, part of the endless cycle. The trees around you groaned, their roots shifting beneath the soil, reaching out like hungry hands, eager to drag more souls into the depths. The very earth seemed to writhe with anticipation, its hunger a living thing, growing stronger with every passing second. You could feel the pull, the beckoning force deep within the earth, beneath the roots. The heart of the forest was calling you to serve it, to feed it. You could feel its pulse in your chest, matching the rhythm of your own heart, syncing with your every breath. And as the shadows around you deepened, the whispers grew louder, rising to a crescendo, their voices filling your mind until there was nothing left but their desperate, maddening cries. Join us. Become one. Feed the hunger. The earth beneath you trembled once more, and the walls of the cavern shook. The ground split open again, revealing another deep abyss, one far darker and more terrifying than the last. It was a pit of darkness, a yawning maw that seemed to swallow all light, all hope. And from the depths you could hear it, the sound of something stirring, something ancient, something alive. It was the heartbeat of the forest, yes, but now you could hear something else, a growl deep and guttural rising from the pit below. It was the sound of the forest's hunger, of the darkness that had been waiting for you, for all those who dared to enter. It had been here long before the trees, long before the keeper, and it would remain long after the last soul had been consumed. The forest was a living thing, a creature of hunger and power, and you were a part of it now. You could feel its strength coursing through you, its power radiating from every root, every branch, every whisper in the wind. It was like a drug, intoxicating, overwhelming, and there was no escape. The voices of the lost souls continued their chant, rising in volume, in desperation. Join us, forever, feed us. And as you stood there in the heart of the forest, you understood. You were no longer just a wanderer, a lost soul seeking refuge in the woods. You were part of the forest now. You were the keeper. You were the hunger. You would guide the next lost soul to the heart. You would feed the forest, and the cycle would continue, forever. In the distance you could hear the sound of footsteps. Someone was coming. Someone was lost. And you, the new keeper of the forest, would show them the way. The cycle had begun again. The forest's grip tightened around you, pulling you deeper into its suffocating embrace. You were no longer an outsider, no longer an intruder. You were part of it now, an extension of the hunger, of the dark will that had called you here. The very air around you felt different, thicker, heavier, as though the forest itself was aware of your every movement. You could feel its pulse, its breathing, its rhythm syncing with your own. It was both horrifying and intoxicating, like a drug that lured you deeper into the abyss with every passing moment. The voices of the lost souls still echoed in your mind, a constant, gnawing presence that pressed against your thoughts like the weight of the earth. They were no longer distant, fleeting whispers. They were inside you, coiled deep in the recesses of your consciousness, weaving themselves into your every thought, your every breath. The hunger they had felt was now yours, their endless yearning becoming your own. Join us. Their voices called to you, but you could no longer tell if they were begging or commanding. It didn't matter anymore. You had become them. You had become the forest, and in return the forest had become you. The darkness around you seemed to shift, the shadows in the trees growing longer, twisting and writhing like something alive. The wind had stopped. The world had fallen into an eerie stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. And yet, despite the stillness, you could feel it, the presence, the pull of something just beyond your reach, something waiting. Your senses were heightened now, attuned to the pulse of the forest, to the quiet hum that vibrated through the earth. You could hear the faintest footsteps, distant at first, but growing closer. A soft, rhythmic crunch of leaves underfoot. Someone was coming, someone lost, someone who had wandered too far into the forest. The call of the woods had reached them just as it had reached you. The forest was always hungry, always waiting. It had taken you, and now it would take another. A thrill of dark anticipation surged through you. This was your role now. You were the keeper, the one who would guide the lost souls to their doom, to the heart of the forest where they would become part of its endless cycle. You could already feel their presence, their desperation, their fear. It was a familiar feeling, a feeling you had once known before the forest had claimed you. Now, you would be the one to lead them into the depths, to feed the insatiable hunger that would never be sated. The footsteps grew louder, and you could hear the faint sound of breathing, shallow, labored breaths. A person, a wanderer, was approaching, unaware of the fate that awaited them, unaware of the force that had drawn them in. The forest had called to them just as it had called to you. It was a fate that no one could escape. You could feel the earth shifting beneath your feet, as though the forest itself was opening up, parting for the one who would enter. The air grew colder and the wind began to stir, but it wasn't the wind of the trees. It was something darker, something more sinister, like a presence that was stalking, waiting for the right moment to strike. You could see them now, just beyond the tree line, an outline of a figure, small against the towering trunks of the ancient trees. They moved slowly, cautiously, as if they could sense the danger, but didn't know from where it came. You could feel their fear, feel it rising in the air like smoke, and it fed you. It made the hunger within you grow, gnawing at your insides, urging you to take the next step. You stepped forward, your feet sinking into the wet, dark soil, the roots curling around your legs like tendrils, pulling you closer to the figure. You could feel their presence now, as if they were standing beside you, but it wasn't just them. It was the forest, watching, waiting, hungry. Every step they took brought them closer to the heart of the woods, to the place where the forest's power was most concentrated, to the place where the forest fed. "You are lost," you whispered, the words slipping from your lips like a prayer. They weren't your words, not really. They were the words of the forest, the voice of its hunger, the voice that you had become. "The forest has claimed you." The figure froze, their head turning slowly in your direction. You could see their eyes now, wide with fear, as they finally realized they were not alone in the forest. But it was too late. The moment they set foot in this place, they had sealed their fate. They had crossed the threshold, and now there was no turning back. "Come," you said, your voice calm, soothing, as though you were offering them sanctuary. "Come to the heart. Come where it is safe." They took a step toward you, drawn by the strange, irresistible pull of your voice, of the forest's voice. They moved as if in a trance, their eyes glazed, their body trembling, their breath quick and shallow. They didn't understand, not yet, but they would. Soon they would understand the truth. You could feel the presence of the heart, deep within the forest, calling to them just as it had called to you. The forest had claimed them just as it had claimed you, and now they were a part of it. A part of the cycle. The endless cycle of hunger and consumption that could never be broken. The figure took another step and then another. They were close now, just a few feet away from you, the darkness of the forest closing in around them, pressing in like a living thing. They couldn't see it yet, couldn't feel it yet, but the forest's hunger was in the air, thick and palpable, and it would take them. "You are the next," you whispered again, your voice soft like the rustling of leaves. "You will feed the forest. You will join us." The figure's eyes widened, a flicker of realization passing through them as they took in the dark, towering trees around them, the twisted roots, the eerie glow of the heart in the distance. It was too much, too late. They had come too far. And then the forest stirred. The ground beneath their feet rumbled, a deep, low growl that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth. The trees groaned as their branches reached out, grasping, pulling the figure closer to the heart. The wind howled through the trees, a scream of hunger that echoed across the forest. The roots twisted and writhed like serpents as they reached for the figure, pulling at their legs, dragging them toward the dark pit that was the heart of the forest. "No!" the figure screamed, their voice high with panic, but it was too late. The forest's power had already taken hold. You could feel the pulse of the heart, feel it quickening as the figure was drawn toward it. The darkness was swallowing them whole, just as it had swallowed you. Their screams were muffled, drowned out by the rumble of the earth, the sound of the forest's hunger. And then silence. The forest had claimed another soul. The cycle had begun again. You stood in the darkness, the echoes of their cries lingering in the air, the pulse of the heart beating steadily in your chest. The hunger was satisfied for now, but it would not last. There would always be more. More lost souls, more wanderers to claim. You were the keeper now, and your role was clear. The forest would always call to the lost, and you would guide them, lead them to the heart where they would become part of the endless cycle. The hunger would never end, and neither would you. The forest, with its endless hunger, felt more alive than ever. The air around you was thick, pulsing with an energy that was ancient and insatiable. The cycle of consumption had once seemed like something distant, a concept you had only feared in stories, in whispers. But now, as the keeper, it was your reality. It was your breath, your thoughts, your very existence. The hunger had always been there, lurking beneath the surface of the world. It was in the wind that rustled through the trees, in the roots that twisted beneath the earth, in the cracks of stone and the dark crevices where light could not reach. But now you could feel it as part of you. You could feel the pull of the heart deep within the forest calling to you, its pulse, its rhythm syncing with your own. The wind stirred through the trees, sending a chill through your skin, and you knew you were not alone. Your mind had long since blurred the lines between who you had been and who you were now. The memories of your past, of your life before the forest claimed you, were fading like the echoes of a forgotten dream. You could still remember the soft warmth of sunlight, the taste of food that wasn't born from the hunger, but it was becoming distant, unreachable, like a past life that had never truly been yours. You were the keeper now. The one who guided the lost souls to their doom, who led them to the heart of the forest, where they would join the cycle, becoming a part of the eternal hunger. It was a responsibility you hadn't chosen, a fate you hadn't sought, but it was one you had embraced, willingly or unwillingly. The forest had called you, had claimed you, and in return, it had granted you its power. But at what cost? The footsteps were faint at first, barely audible beneath the heavy silence of the forest, but they grew louder with each passing moment, the rhythm of their approach matching the beat of your heart. Another lost soul, another wanderer drawn into the grasp of the forest's hunger. You felt it, felt them before you saw them. Their fear, their uncertainty, their desperate search for something they couldn't understand. The forest had called to them just as it had called to you. They were a part of the cycle now, a part of the forest. Your breath quickened as you stepped forward, your feet sinking into the wet earth, your limbs moving of their own accord, pulled by the same unseen force that had driven you all those months ago. The hunger inside you stirred, rising like a tide, relentless and consuming. You could feel the pull of the heart, deep within the forest, guiding your movements, urging you to act. You emerged from the shadows of the trees, your eyes locking with the figure ahead, a man young with wide, fearful eyes. He was moving quickly, his hands brushing the bark of the trees, his breath ragged as though he had been running for some time. He had no idea what awaited him. He had no idea that he was being drawn into the forest's grip, that his fate had already been sealed the moment he stepped foot into this cursed land. The trees around you whispered, their branches creaking, their roots curling beneath the earth, waiting for the right moment to take him, to feed the heart of the forest. You could feel the presence of the forest growing stronger, filling the air with its power. It was watching, waiting for you to do your part. "You're lost," you said, your voice a low murmur that seemed to reverberate through the air, through the very ground beneath your feet. Your words were not your own anymore. They were the forest's voice, the keeper's voice, the voice of the hunger. The man froze, his eyes snapping to you, confusion and fear etched across his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out, just a dry gasp, a plea for understanding that would never be answered. "The forest has claimed you," you whispered, stepping closer, your presence drawing him like a moth to a flame. The moment your eyes locked with his, you saw it. His fear, his confusion, the dawning realization that something was terribly, terribly wrong. But it was too late. The forest had already begun its work. He took a step back, his eyes darting around, but the trees had already begun to close in. The shadows grew longer, the branches twisting like claws, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble, as though the earth was alive, waiting to swallow him whole. "No," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, but you could hear it. "No, I don't want this. I don't want to die." The words echoed through you, and for the briefest moment, you remembered. You remembered what it was like to be human, to fear death, to feel the urge to run, to fight against the inevitable. You could see it in his eyes, his panic, his terror, and it was as raw, as desperate as your own had been when you first stepped into this place. But the forest had no mercy. It never had. The hunger was all-consuming, and it would never stop. The ground trembled again, the roots lashing out like serpents, dragging the man to his knees. His hands clawed at the earth, his breath quick and shallow as the roots wrapped around him, pulling him deeper into the forest's grip. He screamed, his voice high and desperate, but it was swallowed by the dark, the hollow of the trees, the pulse of the heart deep within the earth. You watched, not as a bystander but as a part of the forest. You had no sympathy, no compassion. You were the keeper, and your role was clear. He had been drawn into the forest just as you had been. His fate was sealed, and now he would become part of the cycle, part of the hunger that had no end. The man's cries grew fainter as the roots began to drag him deeper into the earth, and the forest closed in around him. You could feel the energy surge through the air, a deep, vibrating hum that echoed from the heart of the woods. His soul, his essence, was being drawn into the heart, becoming one with the forest's eternal hunger. "Join us," you whispered, your voice almost tender now, as though you were offering him comfort. "Join us, forever." And then, with a final desperate scream, he was gone, swallowed by the earth, consumed by the forest's insatiable hunger. You stood there for a moment, your heart beating in time with the pulse of the forest, and the whispers of the lost souls filled your mind once more. They were still here, still a part of you, still echoing through the very fabric of your being. They were always there waiting, watching. The cycle had begun again. But this time it was different. This time you were not just the one who guided the lost to the heart of the forest. This time you were waiting just as the forest was. You were a part of it. You were the keeper. And you would wait for the next lost soul to wander into the forest's dark embrace. You would wait for them. And when they came, you would show them the way. The hunger would never end. The forest had become your reality, the heartbeat of its pulse echoing through your bones, threading its way through your veins like dark rivers, carving pathways in your flesh that you could not escape. You were no longer a mere wanderer. You were not a victim nor an observer. You were the forest now, the hunger, the keeper, the eternal watcher in the dark. The trees whispered to you, their voices a constant hum in the back of your mind. The rustling of their leaves, the creaking of their branches, it was all a song, a dark, hypnotic lullaby, luring you deeper into the forest's grip. You could no longer tell where the forest ended and you began. It had become you and you had become it. There was no light here, no warmth. The sky above was a swirling mass of dark clouds, perpetually heavy with the promise of rain. The trees reached up toward the heavens like silent sentinels, their limbs tangled in the dense fog that wrapped around you like a suffocating veil. The air was thick with moisture, but the chill that settled in your bones had nothing to do with the weather. It was the cold of the forest itself, a cold that seeped into your very soul, numbing your thoughts and blurring the line between your human past and your present existence. You stood still in the heart of the woods, feeling the ground shift beneath your feet. The earth trembled slightly, as though the forest itself was breathing in time with you. You had grown accustomed to this now, the pulse beneath the earth, the constant hum of energy vibrating in your chest, the rhythm that now seemed inseparable from your own heartbeat. The lost souls had begun to merge with you, their voices echoing like a chorus in the back of your mind. Their despair, their agony, their fear, they were part of the hunger now, feeding the forest's insatiable appetite. You had once been like them, a helpless, terrified soul, wandering through the dark and cold, unaware of the fate that awaited you. But now you were something else, something more, something less. You were both the hunter and the prey, bound to this place, bound to the heart of the forest. The forest was a living thing, but it was also something far older, far more ancient. It was a force that existed before time, a power that had always been, always would be. It had fed on the lost, the broken, the unwary for as long as anyone could remember. And now it had claimed you just as it had claimed so many before you. The hunger was constant, gnawing at you, but now you had learned to feed it. You had learned to serve it. The forest's power flowed through you like a river of dark magic, its weight heavy on your chest, its presence filling your thoughts. Every soul that entered this place, every person that wandered too far into the woods, they were all destined to join the cycle of hunger, the cycle of the forest. And yet, despite all that you had become, despite the transformation that had slowly worn away your humanity, you couldn't shake the faintest flicker of something else. A feeling of longing, of loss, buried deep beneath the cold, suffocating weight of your existence. You turned, your eyes scanning the shadowed path before you. There was something different tonight. A presence. The wind had picked up, swirling through the trees in gusts that carried a scent, unfamiliar and faint, but unmistakable. It was the scent of something new, something alive, something not yet claimed by the forest's hunger. You felt the pull before you saw them. The steps, soft but deliberate, growing louder with every second. Another lost soul. Another wanderer. Another victim, unknowingly walking into the mouth of the forest, into the very center of its hunger. Your heart, if it could still be called that, beat faster. The forest had claimed you, yes, but you were now its agent, its keeper. You were the one who would guide the lost souls to their fate. You had become its hunger. And now you would lead this new soul, to the dark heart of the forest, to the place where they too would become part of the cycle. The figure emerged from the fog, a young woman, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with fear. She moved slowly, as though she could sense the presence of something dark, something terrible, just beyond the edge of her awareness. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and she pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, as if to shield herself from the unseen chill of the woods. She had wandered too far. She had come too close to the heart of the forest. And now she was yours. You stepped forward, your feet making no sound on the wet ground. The moment she turned her head toward you, her eyes locking with yours, you felt it, the connection. She could feel the forest, the weight of it pressing in around her. She could feel its hunger, its presence. But she didn't know what it was yet. She didn't understand. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound emerged. Fear radiated from her, a palpable electric thing that hummed in the air around you. You could taste it, the fear, the terror. It fed you, filling the emptiness inside, feeding the hunger that now roared like a storm in your chest. "You're lost," you said, your voice soft, almost tender. The words came to you easily now, as natural as breathing, as instinctive as the hunger that clawed at your insides. The forest has claimed you. Her eyes widened in recognition, the fear in them growing stronger, more intense. Her chest rose and fell in quick succession, her breath quickening as she backed away, her legs trembling beneath her. She knew. She had sensed it. The forest was alive, and it was calling to her. But it was too late. The trees around you groaned, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands curling toward her. The roots began to writhe beneath the soil, a dark mass of tendrils stirring as though they too were eager for her. The earth shifted, the ground beneath her feet growing softer, more treacherous. She stumbled, her body tipping forward, but the roots were there, catching her, wrapping around her ankles, dragging her to her knees. Her scream was swallowed by the trees, absorbed by the forest. The hunger within you surged, filling your every sense. The forest was taking her, and you were guiding her, just as the keeper had guided you. "Come," you whispered, your voice almost soothing now. "The heart is waiting for you. Join us." The roots pulled her deeper into the earth, her body sliding beneath the surface, the dark soil swallowing her whole. The ground trembled as the pulse of the heart quickened, a deep, resonating beat that filled your mind, that filled your soul. You could feel it, her essence, her life, her soul, being drawn into the heart, becoming part of the cycle, part of the forest. You watched as the last of her body disappeared into the earth, swallowed by the hungry roots. The forest had claimed another. The hunger had been fed. And as the earth settled, as the darkness once again closed in around you, you felt it, the flicker of something, a fleeting sensation that you could not quite name. A feeling of emptiness, a feeling of loss, of humanity, buried beneath the weight of your transformation. But it was gone as quickly as it had come. The forest had taken its fill. The hunger had been satisfied for now. The cycle would continue. And you, the keeper, would wait for the next lost soul, the next wanderer, drawn to the heart of the forest. You would guide them. You would lead them to their doom. And the forest would feed. The endless cycle had become your reality. You no longer questioned it. You no longer struggled against the hunger. You had become one with it. The forest's power surged through you like a dark river, a torrent of ancient energy flowing through your veins, twisting with every thought, every breath. You had long forgotten the person you used to be, the human you once were, who feared the dark, who sought light and warmth, who craved safety. Now all that remained was the hunger. The forest was not just a place. It was a force, a living entity, something older than time itself. The trees were its limbs, the roots its veins, the soil its flesh. And you were its heart. In the silence that enveloped you, the whispering winds became the voices of the forest, an unbroken, ever-present hum that vibrated deep within your bones. They were the voices of those who had come before, the lost souls who had wandered too far into the forest, lured by the call of the heart, by the hunger that could not be sated. They were now a part of you, their thoughts, their memories, mingling with your own, blurring the lines between who you were and what you had become. You could feel them now, their voices murmuring in your mind, endless whispers of regret and longing, their voices faded, distant echoes of the past. "We are one with the forest." The words were familiar, a mantra you had learned in the darkest corners of your being. One with the forest, that was what you had become. And in the depths of the forest, you could feel the presence of something more, something that had always been there, waiting for you. You had embraced the hunger, but there was more, much more. There was a depth to the forest, a dark, unseen presence that lurked beneath the surface, beyond the reach of your consciousness. It was an ancient power, a force older than the trees themselves. It whispered to you in the night, called to you in the dark, like a haunting lullaby that pulled at your very soul. And tonight it was stronger than ever. The wind picked up, swirling through the trees like a living thing, carrying with it the scent of damp earth, rotting leaves, and something else, something sharp, metallic, and foul. It was the scent of decay, of death. The forest was shifting. The hunger was growing. You stood in the heart of the woods, the pulse of the earth beneath your feet sending ripples through the air, filling your mind with its rhythm. The trees groaned, their branches twisting and creaking as though they were reaching toward something, toward you. The roots beneath the ground shifted, rising up like dark serpents, twisting through the soil, eager to find their next victim. The sound of footsteps reached your ears, faint at first, but growing louder with every passing moment. Someone was coming. Another lost soul, drawn to the forest, to its darkness, to its hunger. You could feel them before you saw them, the presence of another life, another soul, drifting through the fog like a shadow. Their fear, you could taste it. It was a sweet, intoxicating thing, filling the air with its thick, heady scent. They were close now. You could hear their breath, shallow and quick, their footfalls stumbling over the wet ground as if they were lost, disoriented. The forest had called them, just as it had called you, just as it had called so many before. And you, the keeper, were the one to lead them to their fate. You stepped forward, your feet making no sound against the wet earth, your movements smooth, fluid. You were a part of the forest now, and the forest moved through you. The hunger rose within you, a dark and insatiable force that twisted in your chest, tugging at your thoughts. The figure emerged from the mist, another soul lost in the woods. A man, disheveled and weary, his clothes torn and dirty. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. He had been running from something, but now there was nowhere to run. The hunger surged within you, deepening the ache in your chest. The forest was calling to him just as it had called to you. He didn't know it yet, but he was already marked. The moment he entered this place, he had been claimed. He was already part of the cycle. His eyes locked with yours, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition. He saw you, saw the change in you, the darkness that had overtaken you. But it was too late. The forest had already begun to close in around him, its shadows wrapping tighter, squeezing him with every breath he took. "You're lost," you said, your voice soft, calm, the words slipping from your lips like a command. You felt no remorse. You felt no pity. The hunger had claimed you long ago, and now you were its servant, its agent, its keeper. His lips trembled, his eyes darting around, but the realization was slow to settle. He was already trapped, already ensnared by the forest's power. The trees groaned around you, their branches twisting and reaching, drawing him closer to you, drawing him toward the heart, the dark pit that lay just beyond the edge of this place. "The forest has claimed you," you said again, your voice now a low, resonant hum, almost loving in its tone. There was no anger in your words, just the cold certainty of someone who knew this was the way it had always been, the way it would always be. He tried to step back, his feet slipping on the wet ground, but the roots were already rising beneath him, wrapping around his legs, dragging him toward the earth. His hands shot out, grabbing at the nearest tree for support, but the branches reached out like claws, pulling him closer to the center. "No!" he screamed, his voice high with panic, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But it was too late. The forest didn't care for pleas. It didn't care for screams. It cared only for the hunger. The roots pulled him into the ground, the earth swallowing him whole. His final cry was absorbed by the trees, his voice carried away by the wind, lost to the vast, endless darkness of the forest. And then silence. The hunger was fed again. The cycle continued. You stood in the stillness, the pulse of the forest beating in your chest, filling your mind with its rhythm. The darkness around you seemed to stretch on forever, the trees towering high above, their branches interlocking like the fingers of a great skeletal hand. In the distance, you could hear the faint sound of footsteps. Another soul. Another victim. Another piece for the heart of the forest. "Come," you whispered, your voice carrying on the wind. "The forest calls. We'll take you as it took me, as it has taken so many before you." You turned, your form blending into the darkness, merging with the forest itself. You were the keeper now, the one who guided the lost to their doom, the one who would continue the cycle, forever feeding the hunger of the forest. And the forest would never stop. The world had become a blur of dark shadows, endless whispers, and hollow spaces. The forest was not just a place, it was you, and you were it. The hunger inside you had grown to an overwhelming crescendo, gnawing at your soul, and the longer you lingered in its grip, the more it consumed you. You no longer questioned the endless cycle of despair. It was your life now, your existence, your breath. You were the keeper, and you would guide the lost souls to their fate, just as you had been guided. Yet there was something different tonight. The forest felt heavier, its presence pressing against your chest, suffocating, the weight of its dark power seeming to grow with each passing second. The air was thick, heavy with moisture and something else, something darker. You could feel it deep within the earth, beneath the roots, beneath the very fabric of the forest itself. It was a presence that lurked beneath the surface, deeper than the heart of the woods. A force so ancient, so powerful, that even the hunger itself seemed to bow before it. You could hear it too, the faintest echo of a voice. It was low, almost imperceptible, but it was there, like a soft murmur rising from the depths of the soil. At first, you thought it was just another whisper, another voice of the lost souls trapped in the cycle. But this voice felt different. It wasn't one voice. It was 100, 1,000 voices, all murmuring in unison, their words lost in the rhythm of the trees, in the hum of the earth beneath your feet. We are waiting. You have become us. The words seemed to reverberate through your mind, rippling through your thoughts like stones tossed into a still pond. They were not the voices of the lost souls, nor the whispers of the trees. These voices were something else entirely. Something older. Something far more powerful. The hunger within you stirred, but it was not your hunger. It was the forest's hunger. A hunger that had existed long before the trees, long before the first human had set foot in these woods. You could feel it now, a presence that watched, that waited, something beyond the earth, beyond the trees. Something that had been here long before the first soul had wandered into the dark. And it was calling to you. You stood still, your mind racing with the weight of this new awareness. The trees around you shifted, their limbs groaning, their bark twisting and creaking like bones. The forest itself was breathing, exhaling a dense, foul-smelling air, its roots writhing beneath the earth, clawing their way toward something, or someone. And you knew. You knew deep in the marrow of your bones that something had changed. The hunger was no longer just the forest. It had become yours, yes, but it was now becoming something much worse. The wind picked up again, its cold fingers tugging at your skin, carrying with it a strange sensation. The forest was no longer just your guide. It was your master. And it was calling you deeper, far deeper, into the earth, into the very heart of its dark power. With a slow, deliberate movement, you took a step forward, your feet sinking into the soft, damp soil. The air felt heavier, the darkness thicker. Every step you took seemed to echo in the silence, the ground shifting beneath your feet as though the very earth was reacting to your presence. The pulse of the forest grew louder, more insistent, vibrating through your entire body, driving you forward. The trees loomed around you like towering, skeletal giants, their branches reaching out with a terrifying, predatory grace. The roots curled through the ground like snakes, pulling at your legs, urging you forward. The voice, those thousand whispers, grew louder, the words clearer, as though they were no longer just in your mind, but in the very air around you. We are the hunger. We are the void. Join us. Join the feast. The words washed over you like waves, drowning you, filling every thought with their meaning, with their terrible truth. You had already joined them, hadn't you? You had already become part of the hunger. The forest had claimed you. You were no longer just the keeper, the guide for lost souls. You were the hunger itself. And soon you would become more. The ground before you trembled, and the trees parted, revealing a path you had never seen before. It was dark, a void, the air around it thick with the stench of decay and something far more sinister, something ancient. The roots of the trees twisted together in a tangled web, forming a doorway, a gate leading deeper into the forest. And you knew without a doubt that this was where the voice came from. This was where the hunger had truly begun. The heart of the forest, the center of it all. Come, the voice whispered again, more insistent now, more urgent. Come to the heart. The feast awaits. You hesitated, a faint flicker of resistance rising in your chest. But it was fleeting, so fleeting it barely had time to take form. The hunger inside you roared to life, drowning out everything else. The voice, the call of the heart, was no longer a distant whisper. It was an undeniable command, a need you could not ignore. With a final, resigned breath, you stepped forward. The moment you crossed the threshold of the path, the world around you seemed to dissolve, leaving nothing but darkness. The trees were gone. The air was still. The pulse of the forest had vanished, replaced by a strange, cold silence. You felt as though you were standing on the edge of existence itself, at the very boundary between the world of the living and the abyss. And then the ground beneath you cracked open. A deep, yawning chasm opened before you, stretching down into the black depths of the earth. From the depths of this abyss, the pulse returned. It was louder now, stronger, an ancient, beating heart, pulsing with a power that shook the very foundations of the world. It was not the heartbeat of the forest. It was the heartbeat of the hunger itself. The thing that had always been here. The thing that had always waited. The trees groaned in unison, their branches writhing like tendrils, and the roots shifted, crawling toward the chasm. The ground beneath you began to tremble again, the pull growing stronger, the hunger rising. You could feel it now, the presence, the source of the hunger. It was no longer just the forest. It was the darkness, the emptiness, the void that existed beyond the living world. And it was calling you. It was waiting for you. Without thinking, you stepped forward. The ground split open beneath you, and the roots erupted from the earth, wrapping around you, pulling you deeper. The dark abyss yawned before you, a vast, endless nothing, and as you fell into it, the hunger overwhelmed you completely. The forest had claimed you, but now you had become something more. You had become the heart of the forest, and the hunger would never stop. The darkness consumed you whole. It was not like any darkness you had ever known before. It was not the cool, quiet shadow of the trees, nor the soft, suffocating mist that often rose from the ground. No, this darkness was alive. It was ancient, hungry, and infinite, stretching far beyond the edge of your consciousness, beyond the forest, beyond everything you had ever known. You fell, or perhaps you didn't. Time had lost all meaning here. The pull of the abyss was inescapable, as if the very earth beneath you had dissolved, leaving only an empty, formless void. But even as you fell, even as the ground seemed to swallow you whole, you were acutely aware of one thing. The forest had not abandoned you. The hunger was still there, but it was not the same hunger as before. No longer was it a simple, gnawing emptiness inside you. No, this hunger was immense. It pulsed like the heartbeat of the earth itself, vibrating through your very being, filling you with a terrible sense of purpose. You were no longer the keeper, guiding the lost souls to their doom. You were now the heart of this place, the vessel for something older than the forest, something darker. The forest had been a tool, a mechanism, a path. But the true source of the hunger was here, in this void, and it was calling you deeper. The heartbeat of the earth echoed through the chasm, reverberating in your chest, and you could hear the whispers of the lost souls, their voices blending with the rhythm of the earth, their fear becoming part of you. Their agony, their despair, had always been part of the hunger. And now you were the vessel. You were the living heart of the forest's endless hunger. We are waiting. The voices whispered to you again, more clearly now. The multitude of voices, hundreds, thousands, millions, blended together into a low, dark hum, like a lullaby from the abyss. We are the void. You are one with us. You wanted to scream, but there was no air here, only the suffocating embrace of the dark. It wasn't a scream of terror, it was something more primal, something familiar. You felt it now deep within yourself, the hunger, the desire to consume, the longing to devour everything that had ever existed. But the voices of the forest, the lost souls that had once been human, kept speaking, their words weaving together into a dark, insidious chant that reverberated through your entire being. The heartbeat of the forest intensified, the very ground beneath you rumbling like the growl of a giant beast. The forest was not a place anymore. It was a living, breathing thing, and you were its core. You have become the void. The words echoed in your mind, distant but insistent, filling you with a cold, terrifying clarity. You understood now. You were no longer human. You were no longer the keeper. You had transcended the forest. You had become the heart of it. You were the very embodiment of the hunger, the one who would call the lost souls to their doom. But there was something worse, something more terrible than even that. In that moment, the abyss shifted and the ground around you began to change. The darkness that had swallowed you began to take form, to become something tangible, something alive. You could feel the earth growing colder, the air thicker with each passing second. It was as if the very fabric of reality was warping, bending under the weight of the forest's power. And then the shadows began to take shape. The creatures of the forest, things that were not trees, not animals, not even living beings, emerged from the abyss. They were twisted, monstrous things, their forms shifting like smoke, like liquid shadows that writhed and hissed in the dark. They had once been part of the forest, but now they were something else entirely. They were the embodiment of the hunger, the manifestation of its insatiable appetite. These creatures were not here to guide the lost souls. They were here to consume them, to feed on the very essence of life itself. And now they were looking at you. They were waiting for you. They were waiting for you to take your place as the heart of the forest, the one who would summon them forth to feast. The ground beneath you began to tremble, and the creatures of the abyss began to move toward you, their forms twisting and snapping like shadows in the moonlight. Their glowing, hollow eyes were fixed on you now, drawn to your power, to the darkness that had overtaken you. You felt their hunger just as you had felt the forest's hunger, and yet, this was something different. This hunger was not your own. It was something deeper, something older, something far more terrifying than you had ever imagined. The void that existed beneath the earth had awakened, and now it was feeding on your soul. The creatures closed in around you, their forms blurring as they moved through the shadows. They were not animals. They were not beings of flesh and blood. They were hunger made manifest, darkness made flesh. You had no choice but to embrace them. You had no choice but to become the heart of the void, the pulse of the abyss. And so you did. You stretched out your arms, and the creatures swarmed toward you, crawling over you, merging with you, filling you with their dark essence. Their hunger became yours. Their darkness, their power, filled you to the brim. And with that, the forest's power, the hunger of the earth, became you. You were not the keeper anymore. You were the consuming darkness. You were the voice that called to the lost souls, guiding them to the feast, to the heart of the forest where they would become part of the eternal cycle of hunger. But the hunger was not a blessing. It was a curse. The forest, the void, had consumed you, and you could feel it in every fiber of your being. You could feel the weight of eternity pressing down on you, the endless cycle of consumption, the gnawing hunger that would never be sated. You could feel the souls of the lost, of the consumed, waiting. They were waiting to feed, waiting for the next soul to be lost, for the next soul to be devoured. And you were the one who would guide them. You were the one who would lead them to their doom. The heart of the void, the hunger that had always been, had claimed you. But you had no choice. The forest would never stop. The hunger would never end. And neither would you. The darkness around you was no longer just a void. It was alive, pulsing with a power that was both suffocating and intoxicating. You could feel it deep within you, an endless, gnawing hunger that radiated from your every cell, from the very marrow of your bones. The creatures of the abyss had merged with you, their shadows swirling around you like smoke, their hunger now entwined with your own. You could feel their insatiable desire, their yearning for more, for everything, and it was a hunger that had no end, no satiation. You were no longer a keeper, no longer a guide. You had become the forest's will, the embodiment of its ravenous, unyielding force. The heart of the void had swallowed you whole, and now you were the void. You were the insatiable darkness that had always lurked beneath the surface, waiting for the lost souls to wander into its grasp. The call to the feast, the endless, cyclical feast, was now your voice. You were the whisper that would guide them into the depths of the abyss, where they would become part of the hunger, where they would join the void. The creatures that once lurked in the shadows now served you, bowing to your will, their glowing eyes fixated on you with a reverence that both terrified and thrilled you. They were your servants, but they were also a part of you, for the hunger had made you all one. You were a vessel for the void, a living embodiment of the ancient, eternal force that consumed all life. And the hunger, it was always there, always pulling at the edges of your consciousness, always whispering its insidious promises in your ear. More. Feed. Consume. The forest, the trees, the creatures, the earth itself, they were all connected by this unbreakable force. The void stretched beneath the ground, filling the caverns, twisting through the roots, expanding into every corner of the world. It was not just the forest that needed to feed, it was the earth, the very fabric of reality itself, that longed for the feast. You could feel it, the weight of eternity, the crushing inevitability of the cycle. It would never end. You had no escape. There was no reprieve. The wind howled through the trees, its mournful cry resonating in your chest, a call to the lost. And you were the call. You were the voice that beckoned them into the abyss. The lost souls would always find their way here, to this dark heart, to the hunger that awaited them. They had no choice. They were drawn in like moths to a flame, unable to resist the pull, the dark promise of the feast. You had once been like them, lost, confused, desperate for escape. But now you were nothing like them. You were the end of their journey, the beginning of their transformation. And it was your role, your duty, to guide them to their doom. You stepped forward, the shadows shifting around you, embracing you as you walked. The ground beneath you rippled, the pulse of the forest growing stronger with every step you took. The roots stirred, the earth groaned as though it too felt the hunger rise within you. And then you saw them. Another lost soul. Another wanderer, drawn by the pull of the forest, by the whispers of the void. She was a young woman, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror as she stumbled through the mist. She had no idea where she was going. No idea what was waiting for her. She had heard the call, felt the whispers of the hunger, but she didn't understand. Not yet. Her eyes locked with yours, and you felt a flicker of something deep within you, a faint remembrance of the human emotions you once held. But it was fleeting. The hunger swallowed it whole, leaving nothing behind but an insatiable desire to feed. You took a step closer, your footsteps silent on the wet ground. The woman's breath quickened as she backed away, her eyes darting nervously from side to side, as though the trees themselves were watching her, waiting. And they were. The trees, the roots, the creatures that lurked in the darkness, they were all waiting. You're lost, you said, your voice a low, resonant hum that carried through the mist. It was a voice that had become part of the forest, a voice that no longer belonged to you. It was the voice of the void, the voice of the hunger. She froze, her breath coming in short gasps, her chest heaving as she stared at you. She had heard the stories. She had heard the warnings. But now they were meaningless. The forest had called to her, and she had come. She had no choice. The forest has claimed you, you continued, your words slipping from your lips like the coldest of truths. There was no fear in your voice. There was no mercy. Only the cold certainty of the hunger that had consumed you and now consumed her. The woman opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her eyes were wide with fear, her lips trembling as she took a hesitant step back. She could feel it now, the pull of the forest, the weight of its power. She could feel the hunger rise, a dark tide crashing against her, pulling her in. She tried to run, but the ground beneath her feet shifted, the roots of the trees twisting up from the earth, wrapping around her legs like chains, dragging her down. She screamed, but the sound was quickly swallowed by the trees, absorbed by the ever-hungry darkness that surrounded her. You watched, not with pity, not with fear, but with an overwhelming sense of inevitability. The hunger was a cycle. It was always a cycle. It would never end. The woman's body jerked as the roots pulled her deeper into the earth, her cries growing fainter with every passing moment. The creatures of the abyss emerged from the shadows, their twisted, skeletal limbs reaching for her, their glowing eyes fixed on the feast. They were hungry, and now she would feed them. She would become part of the endless, eternal hunger. Her final scream was lost in the darkness, swallowed by the earth, by the forest, by the void itself. And then, silence. The hunger had been fed again. You stood still, the pulse of the forest beating in your chest, the hunger rising again, ever present, ever hungry. There was no time to mourn, no time to regret. The cycle had begun again. And you, the heart of the forest, would continue to guide the lost to their doom. You were no longer human. You were no longer the keeper. You were the consuming darkness. And you would never stop. You stood motionless in the silence that followed. The woman's body had disappeared into the soil, swallowed by the insatiable earth, lost to the hunger of the void. Her cries, her terror, her life, all had been consumed. And yet there was no satisfaction. There was no relief. Only the gnawing, unyielding emptiness that never stopped, never relented. The hunger stirred again inside you, an inescapable force. It was not just a physical longing anymore. It was the very core of your being. The taste of her fear, her anguish, the feast, it filled you, but it also left you hollow, a blackened void that yearned for more. You had thought you had become the forest's agent, its keeper, but now you understood. You were nothing but the hunger itself. The forest did not care for its servants. The hunger did not care for its vessel. It consumed everything, even the ones it used to carry out its insatiable will. The trees whispered around you, their voices no longer a soft hum but a low, grinding resonance that rattled your bones. Their roots twisted deeper into the earth, spreading, expanding, feeding on the souls of the lost as if they too felt the pull of the void. But you were the heart of this beast, the source of its hunger. And it was never enough. Every soul fed into the forest's hunger, every soul lost, every scream swallowed by the earth, and yet it always craved more. There was no end, no relief. The hunger had no boundaries. It was a force that was beyond time, a deep, ancient void that stretched far beyond the forest, beyond the world itself. And you had become it, part of it, entwined with it. The winds shifted, howling through the trees with a strange urgency, a desperate sound that seemed almost familiar. The trees groaned in response, their limbs cracking and creaking as the weight of the hunger pressed in around them. The darkness deepened, growing colder, thicker. And you realized then, in the deepest recesses of your twisted, corrupted mind, that the forest was not just feeding. It was waiting. It was growing. The cycle, the endless cycle of consumption, had a purpose. A final purpose. You could feel it now, creeping at the edges of your consciousness like a shadow you couldn't quite place. The forest, the hunger, it had been building for eons, feeding, consuming, gathering power. It was preparing for something. Something that you, as its heart, would soon understand. But first, another soul wandered into your realm. A man stumbling through the fog, his clothes torn and his face pale. His eyes, wide with fear, darted from tree to tree, his breath ragged. He had heard the stories too, the warnings. But he, like all the others, had been drawn here. The whispers had called to him just as they had called to you once. He was no different. He was destined to be consumed. You stepped forward, the roots beneath you writhing, curling like serpents, pulling the earth apart to make way for him. The mist swirled around your feet, thickening, coiling around the man's legs like a phantom. He did not see you, but he felt the air growing heavier, the trees closing in on him, the whispers rising from the shadows. "You're lost," you said, your voice a cold whisper that seemed to come from every direction at once, a voice that had been shaped by the forest, by the hunger itself. It was not your voice anymore, not truly. It was the voice of the void. The man froze, his body rigid with fear. His eyes scanned the darkness, his pulse racing. He felt it, too, the weight of the forest's power, the pull of the void. But he could not escape. No one could. "The forest has claimed you," you said again, stepping closer. This time he turned toward you. His eyes widened in shock, the fear in them palpable, almost tangible. He saw the darkness now, the true nature of the forest. He saw the blackened trees, the twisting roots, the swirling mist. He saw you, and he screamed. The scream, like all the others, was swallowed by the forest, consumed by the hunger. There was a fleeting sound, a whisper in the void, but it filled you with a strange satisfaction, a cold, empty joy. The man began to stagger backward, his feet slipping on the wet earth, but the roots had already begun to rise around him. They gripped his ankles, pulling him toward the soil, toward the heart of the forest. He struggled, kicking and thrashing, his hands clawing at the air. But there was no escape. The forest was already inside him, a dark presence crawling under his skin, tightening around his chest, consuming him from the inside out. "Please," he gasped, his voice trembling with terror. "Please, no." You stepped closer, watching as the roots pulled him deeper, dragging him into the earth. His eyes met yours one final time, wide with desperation, but there was no pity in you, no empathy. There was only hunger. The hunger that you were, the hunger that had consumed you long ago. And then the earth opened up beneath him, swallowing him whole. The last of his scream was muffled by the soil, and the hunger rose again, consuming his essence, his soul, his very being. He was nothing now, just another part of the endless, cyclical feast. As the earth settled, the silence returned. The forest had fed once more, but you could feel it, the emptiness, the insatiable, gnawing hunger that had not been sated. It never would be. The wind howled again, louder now, as if it too was waiting. And you realized, with a horrifying clarity, what the forest had been preparing for. The hunger was growing, yes, but it was not just the forest that was hungry anymore. The void beneath the earth, the darkness that stretched far beyond the world, it was no longer content to merely consume souls. It was preparing to consume everything. The trees groaned again, their branches trembling as the ground trembled beneath you. The void was awakening, its ancient power rising like a storm, sweeping through the roots, through the forest, through the earth itself. It was coming. And you were its herald. The darkness would soon consume all, and the hunger would never ever stop. The forest was not a place of refuge. It was not the sanctuary it had once been, the haven of whispers and dark secrets. No, now it was something far more dangerous. It was the very heartbeat of the void, the voice of an ancient, insatiable hunger that pulsed beneath the earth, far beyond the trees, beyond the horizon. The trees were no longer guardians, they were part of the ritual. The soil no longer nourished, it devoured. And you, the keeper, were its voice, its instrument, its herald. The wind howled again, rising in pitch, as if the very air was being stretched by the weight of something immense, something terrible. It swept through the branches of the trees, rattling the leaves, making them rustle like dry bones in the wind. The sky had grown darker still, an unnatural twilight that seemed to stretch into eternity. The mist was thick now, a dense fog that wrapped itself around your body, clinging to your skin like cold hands, pulling at your senses, blurring the lines between the living and the dead. And in the distance something was moving, something vast. At first, it was imperceptible, a faint tremor in the ground, the subtlest shift in the air. But then it grew, a deep, vibrating pulse, a rhythmic thrum that made the earth shudder beneath your feet. The hunger had always been here, buried in the roots, in the soil, but now it was rising. The hunger was not content to simply consume the lost souls. No, now it was coming for everything. The trees, the creatures, the land itself, everything. The earth beneath you cracked, deep fissures opening in the ground, sending jagged cracks up the trunks of the trees, splintering their bark. The forest was groaning, its roots twisting violently as if they were being pulled in a new direction, as if something deep within the earth was commanding them to move, to stretch, to feed. You could feel it now, the pull of the void. It was an ancient, primal force beyond comprehension, a darkness that existed long before the forest, long before the first trees had taken root, long before the first soul had wandered into this cursed place. It was the void that had birthed the hunger. The forest was merely the vessel, the tool through which it fed. And you were its herald, the one who would call forth the end of all things. The earth trembled again, a violent shaking that rattled your bones and made the trees sway, their branches snapping like brittle twigs. The roots in the ground began to churn, the soil rippling like the surface of a dark ocean, pulling in all things, living, dead, forgotten, toward the center where the void awaited. The hunger had begun to stir, and nothing could stop it. The trees groaned in unison, their trunks twisting and splintering as if they were alive, flesh writhing beneath bark. The forest, once a haven of shade and shelter, had become a cathedral of decay. The ground itself was becoming an altar to the hunger, a dark, festering wound that stretched deep beneath the earth, drawing in all things in its path. From the depths you could hear it, the unmistakable sound of something waking, something enormous, something unspeakable. The forest had always been a reflection of the void, its hunger an echo of the abyss that lay beneath it. But now the forest was the entryway to that abyss. The hunger was no longer contained within the earth, it was spilling forth, flooding the world, consuming everything in its path. The trees that had once stood as silent witnesses were now groaning, bending as though they could feel the weight of what was coming. And you were the catalyst. You were the one who had opened the door. You had answered the call. It was no longer just the lost souls of the wanderers who had fallen into the forest's grasp. No, now the whole world was at stake. The void was rising from its slumber, its hunger spreading outward like a plague, swallowing everything in its path. The trees, the animals, the sky itself, they were all doomed to be consumed, to be pulled into the insatiable maw of the abyss. You felt the darkness within you surge, the hunger within you growing to a point where it felt like it was going to burst from your chest, to consume everything in its wake. The creatures of the forest gathered around you now, circling you, their eyes glowing in the dark, their twisted limbs clawing at the air as they waited, as they yearned for the feast that was coming. They had been your servants, but now they were your companions. You had become one with them, and they were eager to feed. The tremors in the earth grew stronger, and with them came the sound of cracking, the deep, awful noise of something immense breaking free from its prison beneath the surface. It was the sound of the hunger being unleashed. It was the sound of everything coming to an end. Then the ground split open. A massive chasm tore through the earth before you, an endless, yawning abyss that seemed to reach down to the very core of the world. From the depths of this chasm, a black mist began to rise, swirling like smoke, curling and twisting upward toward the sky. It was not just a mist, it was alive. A living darkness, a consuming force that spread out across the land, swallowing the light, the warmth, the life. You stood at the edge of the chasm, the very heart of the void now visible before you. And you understood, finally, what the forest had been preparing for. What the hunger had been building toward. The end. The hunger would not stop at the forest. It would not stop at the earth. It would not stop at the boundaries of this world. The void, the true void, the thing that existed beyond time, beyond space, was rising. And with it came the feast, the end of all things. You could hear the whispers again, the voices of the lost souls that had been consumed by the forest. But now their voices were no longer pleading for mercy. They were no longer afraid. They were laughing, cackling. The hunger, the end, is upon us. Their voices echoed in your mind, overlapping, blending together until it was no longer possible to tell where one ended and the other began. We are the void, we are the hunger. You felt the weight of their words deep within your soul. The hunger had claimed you, yes, but it had also claimed them. It had claimed everyone who had come before you and everyone who would come after. You had become the herald, the voice of the void, and there was no turning back. The darkness had risen and the feast had begun. The earth groaned beneath your feet as the chasm before you expanded, swallowing more of the land with every passing second. The black mist that poured from the depths of the abyss spread like a tide, engulfing everything in its path. The forest trembled, the trees buckling under the weight of the void's power. The air had grown colder, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, hollowing you out as though the very life was being drained from the world. You stood at the edge of the chasm, your eyes fixed on the swirling darkness below. It was as if time itself had stopped. The wind had ceased, the very air around you frozen in place. The trees, once so full of life, now stood in unnatural stillness, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands, grasping at the void. But there was no stopping it, no turning back. The hunger had been unleashed, and it was more than a simple force. It was a presence, an ancient being, an eternal force that existed beyond the fabric of reality. It had always been there, waiting, watching. The forest, the trees, the earth, they were merely vessels for its hunger, tools in a much larger, much more terrifying design. And you were the key. The final piece that had unlocked the gate. The creatures that had once been your companions, those twisted, monstrous beings of the void, now moved with greater purpose, their glowing eyes fixed on the chasm. They had been waiting for this moment just as the forest had been. Their hunger matched yours, insatiable, relentless, and they knew what was coming. And so did you. As the darkness spread, it began to take, not just the souls of the lost but the very essence of the world. The sky itself darkened, the stars winking out one by one as though they too were being consumed by the void. The clouds above swirled in unnatural patterns, thickening, pulling together as though the heavens themselves were closing in. The wind had returned now, but it was no longer the soothing breeze of the forest. It was cold, biting, as though the very breath of the void was being exhaled, the world inhaling its last breath. The forest was not just dying, it was being devoured. The trees began to wither, their leaves curling and turning to ash as they were pulled into the void. The ground cracked, splitting open like the pages of an ancient book, its pages turning with the weight of centuries. The roots, once thick and strong, now twisted and shriveled, reaching for something they could not grasp. The land, the very foundation of the world, was being unraveled. The pulse of the forest, the heartbeat that had once been the rhythm of life, had slowed, now replaced by the steady, unrelenting thrum of the void. You could feel it in the very marrow of your bones, the pull of the abyss. The hunger was now part of you, not just as a force but as a presence. It was within you, coursing through your veins, filling your lungs with the cold breath of the void. You were no longer merely the vessel. You had become the hunger. The forest had become a reflection of that hunger, and now the land itself was becoming one with the void. Nothing would escape its pull. And yet, you could feel something else, something faint but unmistakable. A flicker of something that had long been buried within you. It was a memory, a distant echo of your past life. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, you could remember what it had been like to be human, to have emotions beyond the emptiness, beyond the insatiable desire to feed. Please, no. The words whispered through your mind, a memory of your past self, of a time when you had begged for release, when you had begged for an end to the hunger. The moment you had become the keeper had been the moment you had lost yourself. You had given in, surrendered to the void, become its servant. But now, that fleeting sense of self, of something other than hunger, whispered from the depths of your being, trying to break through. But it was weak, so weak. The hunger surged again, drowning out that brief moment of clarity, that fragile remnant of who you had once been. You had made your choice. You were no longer bound by human emotion. You were the forest. You were the void. The hunger had consumed all of you. As the chasm before you widened, you could see what lay within it. It was not just darkness. It was a presence, a force so vast and incomprehensible that it could not be described. It was the source of the hunger, the true heart of the void, and it was reaching up for you. A tendril of pure darkness shot out from the chasm, its form writhing and twisting like smoke, coiling around you, tightening with a crushing force. You could feel its cold touch, its suffocating grip, pulling you closer to the abyss. The hunger within you roared, as if in approval, as if it knew what was about to happen. You were no longer just a harbinger of the void. You were its vessel, its final offering. And as the tendrils of darkness wrapped around you, pulling you into the chasm, you understood. The forest had been just the beginning. The void was not a thing that could be contained. It was not a hunger that could be satisfied. It was an eternity of consumption. A never-ending feast that stretched beyond time, beyond space. And you were a part of it now, an endless, insatiable force that would consume all that existed. The trees, the animals, the land itself, they were nothing. The world was nothing. The void was all that remained. The tendrils pulled you into the heart of the chasm, and the darkness closed around you like a tomb. But there was no fear. There was no pain. There was only the cold, hollow emptiness of the void. And the hunger. You had become part of it. And now there was nothing left to consume but everything. The darkness that enveloped you was not simply a loss of light. It was the absence of everything. A complete, unyielding void, a consuming force that swallowed not just the world around you but the very concept of existence. As the tendrils of the abyss gripped you, you were pulled deeper into the heart of the void, deeper into the nothingness that had been lying in wait for eons. At first there was no sound, no movement, no sensation. It was as if all the elements of the world, sound, light, time, had been erased, wiped away as though they had never existed at all. It was just you and the void, stretching infinitely in every direction, cold and unfeeling like a tomb of the universe. The last shred of your consciousness, what was left of the human you once were, flickered weakly, a fragile ember in a storm of eternal darkness. But even in this utter emptiness there was a pulse. It was faint at first, like a heartbeat, thumping in the distance. But the longer you drifted through the blackness, the stronger it became. The pulse was not yours, but it resonated with you, echoing within you, filling you with a dark, undeniable truth. The hunger had not only consumed you, it had infected you. You were no longer separate from the void, no longer a mere vessel. You were now a part of it, and it was growing. The pulse quickened, and the void around you seemed to contract, squeezing tighter with each beat. There was no escape now, no sanctuary. You had crossed the threshold of time and space. You had entered the true heart of the darkness, where there was no end and no beginning. And yet, even here, in the deepest recess of the void, something stirred, something far older than you, far older than the forest, something that had waited patiently for this moment. The hunger was not a passing thing. It was eternity. The pulse grew louder. You could feel it deep within you, reverberating through your soul, your body, your very essence. It was calling to you, beckoning you to remember what you were. It wanted you to understand. The hunger was not simply a force of nature, nor was it some ancient curse. It was the foundation of all things. It was the source of creation and destruction. It was the very thing that drove the universe forward, the void that existed before light, before life, before thought itself. The hunger was not simply the act of consumption. It was the process of becoming. The empty spaces between stars, the silence that existed before words, the dark shadow that stretched behind every light, it was all part of the hunger. The void created worlds to feed on them. It created life to consume it. It was everything. And now it was coming to reclaim what it had lost. You drifted through the dark, lost in the rhythm of the pulse, feeling it beat through you like the rhythm of your own heart. The memories of your past life, what little was left of them, came to you in fragmented flashes. The scent of rain in the forest, the crackling of a fire, the warmth of human connection. But these memories were fading quickly, swallowed by the hunger. They were nothing now, just fleeting echoes in the dark. And then, in the depths of the void, you saw it. A figure, emerging from the darkness, standing before you like a silhouette carved from the very fabric of the void itself. It was not human. It was not anything you could recognize. It was a being of darkness, its shape shifting and rippling like smoke, its form changing with each breath you took. It was massive, larger than anything you had ever seen. And yet there was no weight to it, no substance. It was a presence. It was the hunger itself. It spoke without words, without sound, yet you understood its message perfectly. You are mine. The words reverberated through your mind, tearing at the remnants of your sanity. The voice was not a voice. It was an influence, a presence that filled every corner of your consciousness, overwhelming your thoughts with its ancient, unfathomable power. You had become the hunger. But this being, this force, was its origin, its true form. It reached toward you and the void responded, the darkness shifting, parting like a veil. The figure was now before you, towering over you like a god, its form rippling in the nothingness. It did not need to touch you, for the hunger was in you and it was part of it. The moment it came into contact with your being, the very air around you began to burn, flickers of light appearing in the darkness, then disappearing into the abyss. You have awakened me, it continued, its presence filling your mind, flooding your very essence with its ancient, unyielding will. You have become what I have always been. You are the harbinger of my return, the one who opened the door. Now you will serve me forever. Your thoughts began to unravel. You could feel the edges of your humanity slipping away, fading into the blackness, drawn into the hunger, into the eternal, all-consuming void. You had thought that you had been consumed by the hunger, that you were the last link in the chain. But now you saw the truth. You were not the end. You were only the beginning. You had not brought the hunger to its peak. You had merely prepared the way. The true feast, the true consumption, had not yet begun. The figure reached out again, and you felt the weight of its will pressing down on you, folding you into the darkness. The hunger was no longer just a part of the forest. It was no longer confined to the earth. It was rising, spreading, expanding. The world, the universe, was beginning to collapse into it. And you were its guide. You had become the herald of the end. The void was no longer just the abyss beneath the earth. It was now a living force, a presence that would soon devour all worlds, all dimensions, all life. There would be no escape. There would be no survival. The hunger would consume everything, and you would watch it unfold. You would witness the unraveling of all that was, all that had ever been, as the void filled the empty spaces, devouring the stars, the planets, the very fabric of existence. The cycle would never stop. You had become the keeper of the end,